First up, RDA incentive, Gateway Office Warehouse. We ready?
Yes.
We good?
Nobody's just giving a primer and spelling it.
Yes. We have Mark Thane. Where'd he go?
Right running fish.
In
the blind spot.
You were seriously right in the blind spot. Sorry. He's literally right behind me. He owns the storage units and Pizza Factory, all there located on Bluff Ridge Drive. He's approached the city with an interesting project. There's some vacant land. Let me show you a map of his properties there. Hopefully this, actually there you go. Trico Holdings, LLC. So there's some land there. And there's great market viability for storage units, but he approached the city with an idea to maybe do something a step above what storage units would be. Something that might house some local businesses, something that might boost sales tax in the Pizza Factory. And that would be an office warehouse complex. So there's two buildings that he's proposing. You can see the plans here. You see Pizza Factory here on the north end. You see the existing Gateway storage here. And this is part of the 750 West RDA. The RDA is meant to spur economic development and create jobs. So he's requested some help from the RDA in this project. So this project here would have two buildings. The north building would have about seven spaces, and the south building would have about 8. And then on the south part of the south building, since it's adjacent to the existing storage drive aisle, he would like to put some more storage units. So the city has a choice. I've laid it out here in the packet. Hopefully you've had a chance to go over this. But basically there's 3 options. So the standard way of incentivizing that we've done, a lot of the deals that we've done, is a rebate. So a rebate, the way that works is that he would build it, and then once it's built and assessed and we start receiving an increased amount of taxes from that building, we could then take that and return it back to him. So we think that would be about $36,000 a year. And there's another 10 years left in the RDA. So 36,000 times 10 years is $360,000. So we could provide that as an incentive if we wanted to help him, help incentivize him for building this building, those 2 buildings. Option 2 would be to do something similar to what we did with Dayton. So there's, we call it tenant improvement incentive. So Mark takes a big risk in building the buildings, and the risk is that he can't lease them out. And if he can't get income from what he built, then that's a problem. So the city could step in and help him keep those full. And the way it worked the other time, we were able, if there's a company that came to the city with certain qualifying characteristics, we could take either 10 cents off or 15 cents off per square foot and help them make that space just be very affordable. And then the third option is that the RDA has money accumulated through taxes that it's collected for the last little while, and the city RDA board could choose to provide some sort of loan or incentive up front, or pay for certain infrastructure improvements such as a driveway or a water line, or it could also provide the extra money to upfront to make the building go from the minimum industrial standards to maybe a higher standard. So that's why we're here. Obviously, we're not voting tonight. Mark would like some input and direction from the council on what we'd prefer, which one of those three options, or all of the options, or two of the options. So there you have it.
Mark, would you like to address the council?
I would love to, if I have a couple of minutes, is that okay? So, I wanna go back, boy, many, many years. If you'll pull back up that map, Noah. This original road, Bluff Ridge Drive, used to come straight out here. You don't show what's across the street, right, Noah?
You can see that
There you
drive
go.
aisle.
So I worked with the city government at that time and said, we owned all this property, and I said, let's look at the long-term issue here, which is you got two cities, Syracuse and Clearfield, which didn't talk, and so those roads are offset by 200 feet. And it's kind of a disaster waiting to happen. So by working with the city back then, we rerouted that road, and that's why the kink is in there. At that time, we talked about this whole area, and it was all industrial. There was a building on that corner west of Pizza Factory. And since that time, that was when the RDA was put in place, 2003, 2000 ballpark. Anyway, what's that?
2007.
7?
2009.
No, you're right, 2003.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought it was 2003. So, anyway, just since 2003, we, Trico Holdings, has put in, to the RDA over about $800,000 to date. We also anticipate before that RDA expires in another 10 years that we'll put in, at the current tax rates, which that's conservative because they won't stay the same, we'll put in another $900,000 into that RDA if we do nothing. So these additional buildings are going to kick in the other additional 360 that Noah talked about here. And our only dilemma here, and the reason that we came to the city council, was there's an industrial look, which,
You want me to show you that?
yeah, you can see up in Clearfield, just up the road a little ways. Just go ahead.
I mean, I could show them the existing buildings.
Well, yeah, that's the industrial look.
Yeah.
Bless their hearts. But if you take a look at the Pizza Factory and say the incentive to give a facade that, and again, to council member Mon's comment earlier about bait and switch, I do not want to do that here. So don't hold me to this exact look, but certainly rock, stucco, as opposed to metal.
Fair enough, yeah.
Is something we desire to do there for the face that you're gonna see on Antelope. But in order to do that, we take a huge risk that we have to somehow in the rents pay for that. And that's my concern, is can we get the rates to be able to pay for that kind of a facade in an industrial zone. And so, yeah, you can see the vault storage did the same type of look, which I think is a better look than metal. But they have the infrastructure behind there, the storage units, that will precipitate that kind of a look. And so I simply would hope that the council would consider, and Noah and I have had this discussion, we don't necessarily agree, and that's okay. But, you know, if I look at the total dollar amount that we're gonna put into this, it's approaching $2 million. And so whether you look at that total nut, I'm not asking for all that, but I'm asking for enough up front to make the facades nicer and to potentially put a road in that would help that intersection. We don't need to put it in, and it's this road right here. If any of you come out of this road that I mentioned, you know, turning left right there, you're in,
Impossible.
it's impossible, right?
Yeah.
And you're in the turning lane going into the credit union, it's like, this is a disaster waiting to happen. So we have the ability to put a road in up here, which would take this traffic, and now you've got a turning lane to get into. It's a better thing, but this development
Is that
doesn't.
the light just up east of?
Yeah, there's a light up here.
So it's not a light at this end
No.
where you're considering?
And
Okay.
we've been told there'll never be a light there, which would fix the problem, but if UDOT never puts a light there, that'll never get fixed, so. I would hope that there would also be some consideration to help us out on a road, the cost of that road, because again, we don't have to put this in, and we can build this and make it whatever. But I think that's the right thing to do, just like I believe this was the right thing to do, by shifting that intersection. And so, I met with two of the council members earlier, and gave them a pretty good idea of what I would like, and so, that's my 2 cents. No, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mark. Jordan, you want to lead the discussion at the table?
Sure. The first thing is, would UDOT allow us to put in another road right there?
They control.
It's not a road, it's a driveway.
You can access.
It would never be a.
But it's a
Address
curb
that.
cut.
I already have their approval.
Okay.
It's a
I went
Okay.
and got that. When we shifted this intersection,
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the stipulations I made with UDOT. I'll fix this intersection on 1700, but you have to grant me an access up there.
So you have that in writing?
I already have that, yeah.
Okay, that's
And
All right, that was my first
The
question.
curb cut's already in. I just,
Okay.
we don't have to do it.
Right.
So it really would be a driveway, not a road, though. Just-
Yeah. For me, I was actually one of the council members that met with them, and I think, first of all, I think this is a great idea. I love this as a concept for kind of building this area out. It benefits the pizza factory, get some lunch crowd in there. I do like the idea of the upgraded buildings. I would love to have some type of higher quality car dealership in the city. I just bought a car and gave thousands of dollars to one of our neighboring cities, and I'm like, oh, it would be nice to give that to, let it build something here in Syracuse. As it is, Banfield's gonna get a beautiful new park bench somewhere, or something like that.
I have the same.
Yeah. So I love this as a concept. But historically, as we've done incentives, you said that by upgrading the facade, you would now have to charge higher rent. And see, to me, that's where I'm actually okay incentivizing, is helping you get the rent back down. Something we did at one of the other areas, as Noah pointed out, was,
Giza.
what's that?
Yeah, Giza.
I wasn't gonna say specifically, but
We just did.
Giza, yeah.
Just a couple months ago.
But what we did is we actually incentivized the businesses that are moving in there to make sure that you always have tenants. Because it does you no good to build these beautiful buildings if you don't get tenants in them. Because even if we help you, you'll keep the rent low, but we can keep the rent low for longer than you probably can if we incentivize it in that area. We base that incentive based on the more jobs they bring in or the more space they use, the bigger the incentive for that company. So my preference would be to incentivize the tenants coming in to make sure that he can keep his buildings full and to make sure that he's successful and the tenants are successful. So that's kind of where I stand.
Dave, let's go this way.
Well, Jordan said most of what I want to say, so I'm not going to repeat it, but I would add to it that it worked very well in the last time that we helped incentivize the renter, because now they're full and talking about expanding. So I think that's a model that works. I'm really big on consistency. When we find something that works, I want people to know what they can expect out of us, and I want people to be able to say, yeah, we got the same thing that others got when they came and presented to city council. I don't like doing 5 different things, because then people don't know what to expect, and it doesn't seem like we're being consistent with our governing. So I would be very much in favor of incentivizing tenants, because that helps you make your money back faster and solidifies it for the city. I really hadn't considered this driveway, but does enough for the value of the city as far as helping traffic and helping these businesses not be stuck on a bad intersection, that I would consider that as maybe a tenant improvement that we would contribute towards, because that makes, long-term success. So I would consider that as well.
I wouldn't willing to pay for it outright, but I'm definitely willing to help, cause I agree, that actually increases the value of this property
Yeah,
if
it
you
makes
put that,
this more
put that
viable.
drive in.
It makes people want to be a part of this more. So I would agree, I would consider that as well.
Lisa?
I agree with everything that's been said, and would also add, it's a great incentive for anybody who's looking for an office space or a building, that if you can say, this is what we can offer because of the city's involvement, they'll have a tendency to come here and stay there, because you can compete better with all of the surrounding office space. So, and I agree also with the roads, I would like to consider contributing there, because I do think that would benefit us.
My only thought here is that the best guarantee for success is helping those tenants, because of the fact that most businesses fail within the first 5 years. And so if we can help them out even for 10 years, I mean, you're gonna be able to keep these companies there, or even growing and expanding, and that sounds like a great plan.
And then when this runs out, these tenants are already invested in there, they've already got their startup costs done, they've already built out their area, now it's just them and the
Their
maintenance
customers
cycle.
know where to find
Yeah,
them, they've established.
And then they don't wanna jump to another
No.
location,
Exactly,
because
that's why
we
they
have a
try to
lot
expand.
better
Yeah.
rate.
Possibly.
No?
Can I just say one thing about, the driveway, and we've talked about this, and one, just a concern, it's very detailed, looking at the specific site, so I know that this isn't the actual engineering, but if you look, if the purpose of the shared driveway is to disperse traffic, there's a little bit of an awkward, U-turn there. I think most cars can do it, but maybe some trucks or maybe even a trailer or something, if they were, say it's backed up on Bluff Ridge and they do need to go through there and make that turn right there. You know, and I've suggested that maybe it should go straight through there, but I know that would have
Cut your
impacts
car
too.
lot in half.
Well, and then you also have the
What if you,
question of,
what if you straightened out the bottom end?
Well-
Is that not off the property? I'm just asking.
Talking about down here?
well, one
Yeah.
other question is that you do need some amount of curve to help control how much traffic goes through there, cause you don't want it to become the road.
Curbs also control speed.
Well, especially right, but to Noah's point, you know, these flex storages are generally good places for construction offices and carpenters and things like that, and so I think it
They
would,
have some bigger vehicles.
I think it would behoove anyone doing this to make sure that a large truck and trailer could make that turn, otherwise it'll be a problem for your tenants.
Just to be clear, what I was asking, and maybe this is off the property, I don't know. But if this went more straight into here, your big trucks could make that curve. Maybe they couldn't make this curve, but they could make this curve and come back around if they had to.
Yeah.
That's just my thought when I look at it, but I'm not engineering this, and we could certainly do that at a later date.
Sure,
Yeah.
we don't have to do it. This will be secure area though, won't it?
Yeah, I believe that
I'm
is,
sorry, what? Will that be a secure area?
isn't that
No.
gated right
It
now?
doesn't
You have
look like
access
it.
through there.
No,
which is
that
why
is not gated,
Okay.
and never will be.
we have a
Oh,
garage.
Because
the
that's-
lower,
Customers
lower
to
down
be able
there
to
is
do it.
gated.
So
Yeah, they
somebody
gotta have the
could-
delivery trucks
Yeah.
go in the back.
So somebody could come through here and like that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
So if that was kinda straightened out a little bit.
yeah.
I can tell you if all of Bluff Ridge Drives goes that way, we might have to.
Exactly.
Fair.
Exactly.
very fair.
Hey, your tenants might get a ton of traffic. Maybe not all coming to them, but at least
On the back side of their
on
building.
the backside of
I
the
would throw out just the caveat that helping with that drive would be contingent on the whole project being built. I mean, I wouldn't say, well, we'll build the road, but we won't, if we don't build the building. We wanna build the road for the building, so they would be hand in hand.
Noah, do you have enough information that you can go forward with?
So we'll,
With Mark.
me and Paul will work on, and we'll work with Mark to
Mark.
take something
Bring
similar
something?
to what we did last time, and we'll
Something
bring back some
definitive
more
back.
details.
Can I make one more comment? Maybe what I-
Sure, Mark.
So, I appreciate what you're saying about the incentives, but what you're telling me is I will take 100% of the risk up front to invest in the higher look and feel of this center. Because if I can't get tenants, that's a sunk cost. And I'm not sure I'm willing to go out on a
And
limb.
see, I think we can, that's where we can help you. Like, for example, the other development, they were not able, how long have they been there? 5 years?
No,
A couple of years.
couple of years,
Couple-
cause I remember them building.
And they were unable to get any tenants at all. And when we did the incentive, I think they filled up within
2 months.
within 2 months, and they were completely full.
So
And with more plans being,
our goal is to make sure you get your money back by making sure you have tenants. I would be, if you're asking the city to take on the risk of building the building with you,
Just a mix.
then we're also at a risk that people say it's just too high a price to rent there, and we have vacant buildings that we're sharing the burden for. I think that we prefer to make sure that you get those tenants, and our experience in the last couple of years consistently has been that that's the magic bullet. If the rent's low enough and the building's nice enough, so the building nice enough would be you, the rent being affordable in a nice place instead of in a cheap place, we're gonna be matching, they'll have matching rents for lower quality buildings, but they don't want that, they wanna be in a nicer building, so.
And that works until 2030 when this warrant runs out.
It does.
And then they say, I can't afford this high rent anymore, and the contractor goes and finds the 15% or the 15 cents a square foot less, and I'm stuck with a building that I got this much money in, and I can't rent it to pay back that facade.
Well,
But then I
hopefully in
think that
10
in
years
10
you're
years
paid
you've
back.
But in 10 years, you've also escalated the cost of
Yeah.
building and construction, and anybody that comes in 10 years is going to be bearing that cost, which is far more than what we will have done 10 years previous, in my bare opinion, which is clearly not, I don't have a crystal ball, but at this point, we're looking at a lot of growth especially in this area. And we have the West Davis corridor coming in, and we're going to have a higher density population just generally in Davis County. And I think that any construction that happens in 10 years will be, people are gonna have to pay and bear that higher cost, so they're better off to stay in a 10-year-old building.
yeah, I don't think usually after 10 years, just the idea of everyone knowing where they are will be kind of what we can help you with.
Established, yeah.
I appreciate that. The Peach Factory's a good example, right?
Yeah.
Nice building. I know what we've had to do to keep them there. You don't. And I can tell you, it's lower the rent.
I would
multiple
hope
times.
that this helps the pizza factory, because now there's people who will be working here
Yeah,
that will
no, I-
hopefully be a lunch crowd for them.
I get it, but I can get the same people for the lunch crowd with a metal facade. The numbers will be identical.
So that was a, Mayor.
Yes.
Okay, that was a clarification I wanted to make, so, it sounded like the incentive was good for the tenant, tenant incentive. Is the incentive tied to
The higher quality?
going above and beyond the required architecture in the zone? And so that's one, and was there a second consensus on helping with the cost of the driveway?
Well, I think if both buildings get built, and this is just me, if both buildings get built, I'm definitely interested in helping with the driveway, because I think that makes them far more viable. I also think that we're more willing to help. I mean, I'm not gonna say we wouldn't help if the building isn't up to the higher quality, but I would be willing to go maybe a little further, like what we did for the nicer quality building of the last time we did a tenant incentive. It was because they were nice buildings and we knew they could attract the people. We knew we could attract good quality businesses with what they built. I do worry that if you build a lower quality building, then you're maybe attracting customers who maybe are more transient and are maybe less in need of a location that's identified by where they are.
Corinne, did you have a comment?
Just a couple things. That I know that the V vaults, before they opened, they were full. and I'm sure that part of that is because of the outside exterior. So, because it's very appealing, I would be more likely to drive in and go to something like that than an industrial warehouse complex area. And anyway, in between that and just knowing that, also I was in that meeting and you talked about phasing the buildings. So you want to build the first one first correctly, and then if those are successful, go to the next ones. So we have to be careful about how much we're doing, and it have to be in phases as well. So
But tenant incentive is,
yes,
yeah, that phases itself.
it's
but
not a problem.
I think that works itself out.
And the nice part here is, to your point, you've been able to keep the pizza factory open because you could offer them lower rents. We're taking on that risk to help you with that, so that it's not you lowering their rents, it's actually us lowering their
And you
rents.
get paid the same.
And you get paid either way, so
You get paid
we're
the
trying
difference.
to do what you've done for the pizza factory, but take the risk off of you to have to pay for it.
You don't have to take the lower rent, we do.
I mean, what, the building that you build will ultimately be up to you, but I do think, to your point, it's easy for someone to go and find a steel building anywhere.
Yeah.
But it is hard to find a higher quality product, that someone wants to be their storefront.
Right next to cinnamon breadsticks for lunch.
Noah,
The breadsticks.
Noah, do you have enough information you can sit down with Mark?
I'm almost there, I think. So the first issue is, are we willing to do the tenant incentive? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Is it tied to the architecture? I think I'm hearing no.
I'm gonna
We
throw out that,
possibly-
for me, I would do less for a lesser quality building. I would do the full amount of what we did in the nicer facility for a nicer facility.
And
Okay.
I would actually add on that it even gets better than that, the more jobs the business brings. So
I would be for that
if
too.
they bring in, you know, instead of 3 employees, if they bring in 20 employees,
20, yeah.
suddenly now I'm willing to increase the incentive even more for that company.
Okay.
And we did that before. We said, if,
There's 3 tiers.
There's 3 tiers.
15, 12, and 10,
Right.
based off the employment
Mhm.
numbers. Yeah,
Mhm.
so that's what we're planning on kinda
And we
basing
would
this
do
off
that
of.
again. So again, more jobs, more incentive.
Okay, and then the drive aisle, I think is gonna be about $70,000 or so, is that?
Have to go look at my numbers, but.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to help with.
So I'm hearing yes on the drive aisle.
We expect to have
If the
traffic.
buildings are there,
on
yes,
the
we'll do the
Yeah,
architecture.
I don't think the drive aisle is as necessary if the second set of buildings isn't there. So maybe if we are phasing it,
After the second.
if we are phasing it, we would build that drive aisle with the second building. We'd add that incentive in for the second building.
I think that the exterior
this-
is kind of
this one?
negotiable.
Are you
Yeah.
saying this one or this one?
The further.
Which one are you building first?
I'm talking about, this is the proposed, and so this drive, it doesn't help you to get a drive to the back of these buildings, but I think this drive would be incentivized on the building of this building. So that would get built in. This would still have the same incentives for the tenant occupancy, but this one would also come with a driveway if this one goes in as well. But again, I don't think that road's necessary until the second building's there.
Partial phases of it, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? If you only
Yeah.
does the first corner to begin with.
Sure, as long as we get part of it that they can start building in.
Mhm.
That gate, that's just a pedestrian gate,
Where?
Where are you?
where it says
I
install
don't think
gate.
there's a,
That's
installed.
that
To
gate
the-
is going to the
to the south?
outdoor, or
To
under
the
the
power
power lines, where you'd have a
Down.
storage.
Oh,
Just
more
to
to the
protect the
south.
power, yeah.
Yeah, we can't build
Okay.
over under the power lines, that's why that's on.
Okay, so it's not
No, that's
parking
good.
lot at all in between those 2 buildings, okay.
Noah, can I direct you to move this offline now and work with Mark?
Yes.
And see what we can do. Okay, let's move to item C, discussion of the right-of-way of interlocal agreement with Utopia. You got that one?
So last January, actually January 2018, Utopia came to the city council meeting and pitched a couple of models of how they could serve fiber infrastructure in the city. They pitched an idea of either partnering with the city to bring fiber to every home in a kind of a partnership program, or to they could just compete in in the right of way, based on subscribers that they feel it's pencils out. So at that time, the city council said, we're not interested in a partnership, but they are welcome to come into the city and gain subscribers as they see fit. This item here, it's a draft interlocal agreement with Utopia, and basically what it does, it's a franchise agreement that allows them to use our right of way to run fiber, similar to the other data providers in the city, and kind of creates expectations and requirements for them to do so.
So,
they have to get
can I just
permits.
ask quickly,
Mhm.
what changed? I thought we already,
approved this.
we approved the right of way, and we also said no to the subsidy. So,
Yeah, we said we would do it, this is the actual agreement,
Okay.
so that's all it is.
Oh,
well then I don't know whether
Okay.
we wanna change our mind, do we?
Before it goes on an agenda to vote, we just wanted to run it by you and see if you have any
Cause it's
questions.
been a while since we talked.
Yeah.
Alright, well, I feel the same.
So, I actually have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So I've actually had a few citizens, ask me how they can, is this available to citizens or just to businesses at this point?
I will say, I can't answer that, but what I can say is, Roger Timmerman, the executive director for Utopia, is here tonight, and he can answer questions regarding their operations.
So generally, we come into a city to do business and schools and, non-residential units first because they pencil much better.
Mhm.
And we have a lot more expense to do this first phase of a project coming into the city. So initially, I think we just expect it to be that only and not residential units. However, you're getting a lot of infrastructure built at no cost to the city, and so as we continue to get more and more businesses and schools and et cetera, built in the city, the other conversation that may or may not ever go anywhere about doing a full fiber to the home build gets better because the cost of that project is lessened and the time to do it is lessened because we have a whole bunch of fiber in the city. So it helps that. It doesn't mean we ever have to get there, and we have many cities, and we have fiber in over 50 cities, but we only have fiber to the home in 14. And some cities have just said, well, we're not quite there on the fiber to the home thing, but we'd love to have more options in our city, and we've done very well and successfully and partnered with those cities to do that. Our desire is to always get it to the homes. We like that, but some is better than nothing. We'd love to come in here and get some benefit to the city, really with no downside to the city at this point. There's no obligation, there's no debt or anything like that. This is simply just making it available to the businesses that say, I'm willing to pay for my connection and pay for you to come to me. And we have actually quite a few lining up ordering services, and so we just want to make sure we have the contracts in place that allow us to do that. I don't think we have an actual contract in place. I mean, we've had conversations that went really well, and that's why we're like, okay, we really need to formalize this. There's been some cities that say, that haven't required a franchise agreement and just say we're just going to permit things on a case-by-case basis. But our preference is to just have very clear, terms for how we operate in the right of way and take care of things, that we carry the right amount of insurance, that we follow your ordinances and all that. So it's a mutual protection to make sure that we're doing a good job in your city. We do a good job anyways, but it's nice to have the paper.
Thank you. So the answer is not yet, but maybe someday.
Just my opinion, I think I've heard enough interest that I think that you would get the success, but I have to represent the city fairly and say that I don't want to be the person financing this, and I do not want to be the city's internet provider, because I don't think that's right. I think that fair.
Technically, you're the fiber provider, the internet provider is private.
Okay.
Just wanted to make sure it was
I
clear.
guess the point being is that I think that, I think you get it. I think you get more than, you get an overwhelming response, because there seems to be the interest. But I just don't want to be in the business of being another utility. So I would encourage you to consider looking at that, but it's up to you. You're your own business.
Actually,
Yeah, I mean, I can't say, I can't go higher than 100%. I'm 100% confident the whole thing would be paid for, we would bond for it, we'd get the subscribers needed, the whole thing pays for itself, the city pays no dollar. But it's not fair for me to go and ask other cities to be on the hook for the
Fair enough.
financing. So the cities ask new city partners to have a partial guarantee on the financing of new projects, but the threshold for the whole thing paying for itself is really, really low. I would just encourage you to kinda keep tabs with this as we're building out West Point right now, and we're finishing up Layton, this month. And so we'll have more examples even in the immediate vicinity of the city to say, this is how many people signed up, if we expect any sort of similar performance, you know, in this city as we're getting in other places, the whole thing pays for itself.
But Layton's been on board for a long time.
So Layton was part of phase 1, which didn't go well, and they're also part of phase 2, which has gone very well. So there's a lot of history we can go into, but they did backstop a $23 million bond in partnership with us, and it's going very well. So where they'll have to pay nothing for that bond, the whole thing will be paid off from the subscriber revenues. But they are part of phase 1, where they had a portion of $185 million in partnership with lots and lots of other cities back from like 2004 to 2009. That didn't go very well. I wish I could go and do that and do it the way we do it now, and you know, the city and us all inherited that a little bit.
I guess for the sake of moving forward, I mean, put the contract we've already said we want in place and we're good. I mean,
Brody, you wanna respond to that?
Yeah, just, let me paint a scenario for you, if we, you know, you're talking about the partnership model. Let's say, you know, we do this contract, or this agreement, they come into the city and they start building infrastructure, right? I think what's been the issue for us, and rightfully so, is the risk,
Mhm.
right? And so, as they come into the city and build infrastructure, we do not have to do like an all or nothing. If we wanted to do a partnership with Utopia, doesn't have to be all or nothing for the whole city. You can come in phases. But before doing any of that, what I would recommend is do a survey within the area that we could block out. So just say there's a section of the city that we think has a low threshold because there's already infrastructure nearby. You do a survey of all those residents and you get an idea of how many people would sign up. And if it's high enough, if it's overwhelmingly high, then you could just take on the risk of that one section, not the entire city, and that lowers your risk. Now, what does that create for you? It creates, hey, why did they get it and we didn't?
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that
So-
backlash.
Right, so then, you know, I think you can do another survey, and you can do the whole city, or you can do piece by piece. It's just another option. I'm not suggesting that I think that's how you should go, but it's another option that reduces your risk.
See, I'm actually, sorry.
Well, I
You raised your
have
hand.
a problem, I did, I raised my hand. Why are we competing in a marketplace market? This, to me, says then we need to go to Comcast, and we need to go to Xfinity, and we need to go to all of these other companies and give them the same opportunities.
It is.
Well,
It would all be available to CenturyLink and Comcast.
All of the infrastructure, but we're
Yep.
talking about going into a section and saying, do you want to sign up for Utopia? And to me, that intercedes into, I just feel like that's an insidious thing where we get into the market when government is subsidized. And anytime we create a subsidy, it backfires. And I know that there are many things that need to be subsidized, but there are many things that do not. And I, having come from a business background, I know what it means to my parents who own a reception center, who have to compete with the city, who subsidizes other reception venues. And that's an unfair market. It's an advantage that they have. So anytime we subsidize, we have to be really careful that we're not opening up an opportunity for one company and not all the others, or that we're not marketing to everybody equally. So I'm reticent to do that.
Brody, and then Jordan.
I think that's a good point. I think what Roger is saying that, Utopia is just the tube, it's just the fiber. Comcast can actually use their tube to provide service to the home.
With a fee involved, is
But there are
the
other
city
tube
compensating?
providers.
Yeah, and
That's the point.
that's,
And they
but I'm
pay
just
their
saying, I
own
think that's what Roger is saying.
campus.
Yeah, there are other tube providers,
Yeah.
and I think gets to your point. So, you know, I forgot what my second point was. As far as the, competition goes, you know, it's kinda like the post office issue. In a city like Syracuse, where you have areas, especially on the western part of, the community, where the speeds being offered are not there, and they probably never, I shouldn't say never, but it will be a long time before they get there, simply because it doesn't pencil for the other, private providers, the competitors, because they won't run the high speeds out there, because it doesn't make sense for them to do so.
Right.
This is sort of like a post office type idea, where it'll go to the rural, you know, the far reaches, so that everybody gets the same service. And so it's kind of a different mentality, but it does impact the competition. For example, the Postal Service competes with UPS, and so it's one of those things.
Jordan?
Mine is kind of along the same lines. I think it's good to note that Utopia does not actually provide any internet service.
But they provide
The fiber
access
line.
to
What they
it.
do is they provide a fiber line that any business can utilize. And so I actually think that this would actually be a good benefit to the community, to get high-speed internet to all of those areas that are underserved. Just like you wouldn't say,
Hey,
hold on, let me finish.
I haven't said a thing the whole
I
time.
know. I raised my hand.
And she's rested, she's been in Cancun.
That's true.
Just wait with-
But I do think that this is actually a good thing that at some point we really need to take a good hard look at, because there are areas of our city that are underserved. And really it comes down to, do we buy into the fact that every home needs high-speed internet? And that's where I'm not quite there yet.
Bingo, thank you.
I'm not quite there yet, that every home needs a gig connection or
It's different than a
500
water line
meg.
or a gas
I
line.
agree. And so that's my only hang up, but I do think if we can help facilitate some of this to some of these areas, I'm actually in favor of that.
See, here's the problem though with saying the but, is that you're taking a choice away from everyone by signing everyone up for paying for it. So, let's get back to taking care of the city contract for the city businesses and the city offices and move on.
This
That's
isn't
my
for the
vote.
city offices, this is just for the
Well, it's
interlocal
around
agreement.
this area.
Yeah, we already
It's pretty-
approved the city offices
Yes,
for this.
okay.
So-
Okay.
I agree.
So the question is, can that go on the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
And I think you could probably put it
Hang
on
on just a
consent.
bit.
So I just need to make a correction on one thing I said. I said we wouldn't be interested in doing residential. We are interested in doing all new development. So if there's, for any new subdivisions and developments that are coming in, we would like to know about them. We'd like to work with those developers. Developers desperately want their communities to have good options, and so a lot of times with tight coordination, we will put our fiber into those communities. But for what's considered brownfield, where you have to go drill it
Tear up the
into
street,
existing
yeah.
areas, that's where it requires a city partnership.
I'm willing to direct Noah to give you a call once a month and tell you where our new developments are.
we would like
Yeah,
those calls.
That's wonderful.
And I would also, if possible, I know that as part of, I would encourage you to try and, as we have a lot of stuff coming in with the freeways, look at putting those things in as soon as you can, because once the freeway goes in, it's gonna be a lot more difficult. And so we have business centers that we are planning on having a lot of business, especially at our nodes that we've talked about. So if you can kind of bring up to speed on where those nodes will be, because I think it would behoove you to have fiber connections both along the Antelope corridor going down to at least 3,000 and along 193, because we think there will be a lot of.
Never mind past 3,000.
What's that?
I live past 3,000.
So do I.
I'm just saying that.
And I would love it if they come past 3,000, but I
yes,
probably
for-
won't.
Go to 4,000.
No, my point is that you never know where the business zones are gonna actually end up.
It's true.
Yes, but yes, thank you.
But yeah, if you can work with him to kind of make sure he's aware of them, where we think we're gonna have lots of development, cause if, you know, we would love to have some of these types of businesses that are very technology intensive, that are gonna really bring a lot of good high paying jobs in, and I think you can really help us with that.
And from our perspective, anytime there's an open utility trench, we wanna put our conduit in there. It costs about 10 times more to come in after the fact than when that utility trench is open.
So just a quick question to follow along that, who will be paying for that during those new constructions?
You don't pay anything for it, we pay for it.
Okay, then that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Brody, you have enough?
Mhm.
Okay, let's move on. Let me tell you a little something about getting old. I have to put my wallet in a place where, going out the door, I pass it, otherwise I forget it. I've got a little issue that is mine to own, and I'd like to own it. There has been an error in the agenda, and number D was not posted online. Number D has not been posted online because E, the applicant asked to have that withdrawn, and like a cross-eyed bow and arrow player, I hit the wrong one. And so we cannot talk D tonight in specifics about that development. But we are gonna talk about a PRD issue that's germane to that one, and that is item number H. What I would like to do is bring H to that point, because we found a situation where we've got a PRD proposed and our acreage is too small for that. So, Noah, would you like to present that one? Would you present H?
Yes, sir.
And we actually messed up on that, but maybe just being nice. Seconds.
I'm an old man, you blame me.
You can get away with it, we can't.
So we're hearing item H right now,
Item H and D and E are stricken.
and E is.
D and E are stricken.
Okay, item H, Mr. Nate Swain, right there. He's the benefactor of this mix-up on his other application, but the one application that he submitted is to amend the PRD ordinance. If you recall, we had extensive conversation about the minimum project size in the PRD ordinance.
Which is fairly recent. I mean, it's just only been a few months ago, so why are we hearing this again?
Because he applied and he had, as an applicant, he has the right to come before you. So, if you allow me to finish, his request is to amend the minimum project area from what it says right now is 4.5 down to 3. And his argument is that his site that he's working on is south of Smith's and it's about 3 acres. Currently, the PRD ordinance wouldn't allow that. So, I know that there are other sites, for example, behind Walmart. That is not 4.5 acres either. So,
We know that.
in my office, I get a lot of requests for townhomes on those, specifically those two sites that are 3 acres and not 4.5 acres. So, the question at hand, obviously we're not voting. This has not been to planning commission, but rather than have planning commission spend time on this, we wanted to get your opinion of it before there was more staff resources and city resources spent on discussing the item. So essentially it's do you want the planning commission to look further into this and bring back a recommendation to you?
Where do we start, Mayor?
We haven't started anything. Go ahead and let's put in.
This is Lisa's turn.
I think I just barely started the previous, so I'll send it over to Corinne. She looks anxious to say something.
Just for curiosity, I was thinking about this in the situation where there's townhomes just to the rear of this property to the east, correct? In the
Patio homes.
They are fourplex patio
fourplex
homes.
patio homes, so are they considered townhomes then at all because they're connected? Fourplex?
The
No, they're
difference
actually
between the
not.
two is these
That's
will
what
be
I'm clarifying.
they're proposed to be 2-story.
So these are proposed to be 2-story versus 1-story.
Both attached though, and technically the Sunset Park villas do have a bonus room above the garage in some of those, but I wouldn't call it a 2-story product.
Okay, so then the question is if that original product had contained these 3 acres, other than having a 2nd story
Yeah, they could have extended out, but
out
the
to the
city
street.
at the time, so I hear, said, hey, leave that for commercial. And so when we redid the general plan, we identified that area specifically for medium density residential, which would be townhomes.
Right.
So the general plan's reflecting some of those market realities, but our PRD ordinance doesn't allow that flexibility for the townhome to go into some of those areas where there might be market demand for. So that's where you guys get the fun job of deciding whether or not to amend the ordinance to allow that market demand, or, you know, the risk there, if you don't respond to that, then they may apply for the mixed use development zone, which they would have commercial, but they also could build apartments, and so you maybe introducing more density into areas that would be better fitted for medium density town.
Right,
Well, but we
versus
did-
like a huge apartment complex. So now really quick, does that include a height maximum of 35 feet, correct?
That's
35.
citywide. Yeah.
Yes, just making sure,
Okay.
because we can't build huge
Mm-mm.
groupings or anything because of those restrictions.
Not currently.
Okay, just had to clarify those things now. Feel free to anyone.
I have a question. So, if we have this zoned as medium density, what are so it could be,
It could be
What
mixed
are you allowed
use,
to
that's
do?
still allowed in there.
it could be mixed use, it could be PRD, and it could be RPC.
Right.
Is
Well,
that
No,
it?
no, it could not be RPC.
Well,
RPC
that
is
wouldn't
the
qualify
largest.
for RPC.
Yeah, 100 acres.
But RPC is in the medium
Yeah.
It's a
density.
little
And
smaller.
we can't put
Zoning.
PRD just because of the lot size.
So
The
it could
acreage.
only be mixed use, is what we're saying, based on the restrictions of the other two
Of the
zones.
zone.
But
Of
in
the
medium
actual
density, I don't believe the mixed use wasn't allowed in the medium density
Oh,
classification.
Correct.
so we have it zoned such that nothing could ever be built there.
Kind of.
Cool.
That's great.
Well, that's not
I mean, you may
necessarily
keep something
fair to
to have
property
the other,
owners
so.
though. I mean, that's right.
Well, at the time, we discussed that
It's
mixed
general
use
plan.
wasn't fully developed yet, and so there was question as to where that would fit.
Correct.
I would rather make amendments to, now that we actually have a mixed use zone, than make amendments to a zone that we have, that we've debated over and over and over, and we've kind of figured out what works.
Okay, question with that? I mean, you're talking about doing a mixed use there instead.
Do you
Yes?
prefer mixed use in this location?
Okay, so here's the question with that though, because if the concerns are traffic and larger buildings, with a mixed use, you're definitely gonna get both. Versus PRD, where it's gonna be less traffic and small buildings.
Well, so one is the big difference between, is this scheduled traffic or is this, because daytime traffic is not gonna necessarily be in high demand
But
during.
with commercial equipment should be, right?
Well, okay, so you'll get your end of day traffic, but you're not gonna have everybody rushing to commercial at the end of day. So if this was, if this is residential, drive time traffic increases during a specific zone. If it's commercial, it should go throughout and be the same. I mean, that's what studies tell us, whether it's true or not. The idea is that if it's commercial,
About 9 to 9.
business hours, it's all supposedly even.
9 to 9.
Yeah, the
to
AM
6,
peak
7.
and PM peak for residential.
But I think the fundamental issue here is mixed use is currently not allowed in this area.
Exactly.
Okay, so what,
Cause it's zoned
what
medium
would the
density, so
patio, what
mixed
are
use
the
wouldn't even
patio
work.
homes
General plan,
considered?
the current zone.
What density are the
Yeah.
patio homes considered?
I've looked at this, so it's been a while, so I think they're around 7 to 8 units per acre. And
Okay.
at this location, they would be allowed 9 units per acre in the PRD zone because of remember we had the tiers, there's 12, 9, and
And
6.
Yes.
yes,
So this location, and that's what his other application is to actually, for the actual townhomes, would be 9 units per acre at this site. So the actual units per acre is about the same as what's to the east, but it's a different product.
And if they put in apartments, it could go as high as 30 units per acre.
Correct.
There is
but
no
then you'd have
maximum
to
units
change
per
it
acre.
to
So then you'd have to,
higher
then you'd have to
density,
rezone it.
Right.
So no matter what, we either have to change the general plan or we have to change the PRD in order to build anything here.
Unless they wanna build
Well-
single family or R3.
Are those
Which-
allowed in medium
Wait,
density?
but PRD,
R3 is allowed.
R3
R3
is.
is.
R3 is.
PRD,
PRD, R3.
yeah.
But PRD, this currently doesn't qualify, that's why I say you have to change PRD to allow this.
Well, okay, so I drive
What a
this
mess we've
road
got
every
ourselves
day,
into.
this is by my home. And in just considering the impact on it, I think there's a lesser impact with patio homes, and I don't know what we're able to do on this, but I'm more amenable to having, to zoning for a continuation of the patio homes. I know there's tremendous desire and need for them. I've had many people contact me and ask about patio homes in our city, and because this is more of a retirement community, there's an actual office that they can contact where I'm not sure about the contact information for others, but, I think you also have a lesser impact on on 1000. That is a really busy road right now. And that will probably change once we have the connector with the West Davis corridor in 2000 widens and stuff, but at this point, there's only one road, and oftentimes we end up with a huge impact of people driving west for, if there's any kind of a clog on an eastern road, they come to 1000. And there've been a lot of times where I have to drive through neighborhoods to get to a meeting here, just because it's clogged there. So I think if we add, you know, I think it was 28 homes, is that what it was looking, when I read through the townhomes suggestion, that presentation, I think we're going to see a greater impact on traffic, and where I think we'll see a lesser impact with patio homes. We don't tend to do as much driving. The older we get, that's me anyway. Maybe I just do everything online, but I don't tend to go as, I'm not driving kids back and forth to places or taking them to school. And I know that townhomes are a need as well, but at this point I'm more amenable to rezoning to facilitate patio homes, because I think it'll have a lesser impact on the surrounding community as well as Sunset Villas and those residents.
One problem we have here, and we've talked about this in the past, is that this is a little bit of an anomaly compared to the zone that they're requesting, because in this particular location, the 3 acres is not as impactful as it would be if you were to take 3 acres in the middle of a residential zone that already exists as R1 or R2, because I'm really concerned that if we lower the requirement for acreage, what you end up is you get pockets, and those pockets devalue the homes around them. And that's not fair to all those people who are in an R zone, R1, and then somebody comes in and says, well, I'm gonna tear down 3 houses and make 4, or 8, or 12, because I'm gonna apply for a PRD, I'm gonna take your little spot and make it a, you know, apartment complex right there.
Yeah, if you wanted
Town
to, you
complex.
could create, location qualifiers for that, as well as.
If it's connecting to something
acreage.
that's not a,
Yeah,
yeah.
and-
I think that was our reason for saying we wanted a 4.5 acre lot, so that we didn't end up with a bunch of pockets and
didn't.
subdivisions. That was our concern from
And I
what
still
I
hold that
recall.
concern, that's
Sure.
still a valid one.
And also keep in mind that anytime somebody submits an application for a rezone, you'd be provided with a map, you would look at the neighborhood, you decide, but you can't control what future councils do, and I know that that's a concern. So you could, if you wanted to, you could put location qualifiers. You could say, you know, rather than just change it from 4.5 to 3 across the board, you could say, you know, 3
Next
units.
to a major shopping center.
You could
I
On a
mean,
major thoroughfare.
On a
You
major
could
thoroughfare,
say-
on an arterial road,
We already
because,
have the density based off of location qualifiers. We could do the same with minimum project size.
well, that would be worth considering, but that's the case, cause I really do not wanna open the door for people to start throwing in, there's a resident field somewhere, and we're gonna start throwing in high
Council,
density.
the question tonight is, this met favorably with the planning commission, and I should have sent you out a report, but I'm not as dutiful as. They approved this, but with the concession that it didn't fit the ordinance. The question tonight is, do you wanna send it back to them, to look at lowering that number with maybe some concessions on location
And just as I think you guys knew what he's talking about, but, so there's 2 applications here. There's application to rezone that property that we keep talking about, and there's
But it
application
doesn't
to
meet
change
the
the
ordinance.
ordinance. So the planning commission hasn't reviewed the ordinance stuff yet,
Right.
but they have reviewed the application, and that's what he's saying.
It
And
has
they
to go
said-
back.
Contingent on.
And they said, yeah, PRD looks good there, but, the zone
It
doesn't
doesn't
work.
fit,
and,
yeah.
yeah.
So they said if you change the zone.
So
they
there
still
is
make
a
you-
second application already for the zone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the one, that was the mix-up that he was talking about.
That's actually what we're talking about now, is,
Yeah.
is not this division,
what we're-
it's
We're
the,
not talking about the
Change the
property, we're
PRD
talking
to
about the
allow it.
rules on the
Right.
book that applies to
Text.
everything.
So the question is whether or not to send this back to the,
Do you want
To
planning
the
commission to
commission,
look further
to
into
look
this and bring in a
into-
recommendation, or you just wanna kill it, dead on arrival, or?
Well,
or
obviously, we've created a conundrum, so yeah, they need to change.
something has to be done.
Uh-huh.
what? Okay,
I'm,
We have.
yeah, there's I send it with the advisement that we're looking at what caveats protect other properties. Because this is a really big deal to protect other properties.
People would have to apply for a zone change, and as the land use authority, you could say no. So if someone were to propose, I'd like to tear down these 3 homes and put these mill subdivision, you can say no.
But as we've seen, you can't control what future councils do, and somebody else could just,
you can anyway.
Well, they can change the ordinance.
You have to do that with
maybe it's
anything.
the language that you
Just
place
like
into
they have
the
to
text.
trust us.
Yeah, somebody said the same thing about us. Can't control them.
Okay, council, I'm gonna deem that you would like to send this back to the commission with some, to have them study it and present something.
Yeah.
And really
Okay.
considering the impact, well, I know they'll have to consider the impact, but of this specific zone, we have real issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and
one
I
of
think
the
it
things-
does need those qualifiers.
One of the
Mhm.
things that they need to also consider is when 500 West goes through, a lot of the traffic on 1000 is gonna die. Because they'll be from Gentile.
Well, and it might also do the same thing with 2000
Mhm.
widening.
So,
That's why they're, yeah.
Thank you,
okay,
Mayor.
Rhoda, or Noah, would you take that back to the planning commission then?
500 West Point.
Okay, let's go back to F, can we? And again, once this is presented, because this was Doug's, anyone can begin. So, Noah,
We're on F,
F.
we're on F,
let me get back there.
and then we'll do G.
this
Okay.
is just final of the field,
Yeah.
this should be a no-brainer.
Yeah, this would be.
We've already
go into-
approved everything else, so we even need to,
It's just their last phase.
It's up to you guys.
I don't think
Final
there's anything to
subdivision plat,
discuss.
37 lots.
We've left everything else approved, so yes. Move on.
Content opinion.
You good with that?
It looks great.
Put it on consent next time then?
Put it on consent?
Yeah.
You okay with consent?
Yes.
Okay, Cassie, would you put it on consent? G.
Awesome.
Okay, another final plat, Edgewater. You have 2 phases, 30 and 21, so 51 lots. And this is the PRD zone, but in this case, they're doing they're limited to 6 units per acre, but they're not even coming close to the 6 units per acre. It's all single family, no attached. They did
Haven't we discussed this
exactly.
one as well, and it hasn't
Yeah.
changed since?
It hasn't changed one bit since preliminary, it's just they've added some
So-
more detail on the lot dimensions and things like that, and remember.
I mean, I appreciate the process, that when things change, we get to look at it again, but if they don't change and we've already moved past it,
Well, we just have to give
we
them
just give the
Yeah.
nod.
Then we're giving a
Am I
nod.
saying the nod?
Not give
Nod.
Nodded.
Yeah, you don't need to go through a long discussion.
Okay,
I'm fine with
So
that.
I don't have any notes.
So consent on that one too?
consent on that one?
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Consent agenda? Cassie, would you put that on the consent agenda? Okay,
Aye.
item I.
Although the other,
Sorry.
okay, the road is there now, I apologize.
All right.
Recommendation of the planning commission to amend Syracuse City Code 10-30-20 pertaining to building materials. This is the Hardy Board issue.
Yep, so D.R. Horton, we have, David here from D.R. Horton, and this has been through planning commission already, and they're recommending to change it, but it wasn't unanimous. They had some good discussion about, the merits of why we have building material standards, and concerns about, the quality of the material and the value of the homes that will have those materials on it. Ultimately, they recommended what's in the packet to change. So right now, we have 2 options for materials. First option is to require 75% brick rock stone if they do stucco. Second option is to do 30% brick rock stone if they do hardy. And they're proposing a third option that would allow a home only on single family homes, the apartments, the you know, any other residential structure couldn't do that, you couldn't use option 3. But only on single family homes you could do 100% cement fiber. But also on the rear, you can't use, or on any side, you can't use vinyl siding. And on the side, if you're on a corner, you still have to do 100% hardy. But if it's not on the corner, the side and the rear could be stucco. And then in addition to that, they can't just do we're worried about real plain. So we called it what did we call it? Textural variation, such as, you know
So
how
now
they.
you're stepping in the subjective, and that's always makes me nervous, because who judges how much, is there enough textural variation or not?
Says you have to have at least 2 or more textural variations, such as, but not limited to, placing shake in the gables, you know, provides a different texture, or wainscot of vertical battens, right? And you have to have a front porch, because the justification here is they say this modern farmhouse, right? Modern farmhouse, what is one of the major things on these? They have a front porch. And so they went round like talking about, should it be a wraparound?
Well,
front porch,
so
or
you're
should it
talking
be-
about they have to have the whole front have a porch?
Nope. It
Okay,
says
just have a
of
front.
sufficient.
Because
Or
it's
2
just
chairs.
saying that
Let me
that's
read what it
so
says.
identified.
So, single-family dwellings, excluding townhomes, apartments, and non-residential structures, may have the front exterior walls constructed with 100% cementitious fiberboard or plank, or masonry,
It's in the packet.
or any
It's right
combination
there.
therein, only if the following qualifying architectural elements are present on the front facade. At least 2 or more textural variations, such as, but not limited to, placing shake in the gables or wainscot and vertical battens, and containing a front porch of sufficient size for 2 seats and a walkway.
Okay.
So no, not the whole, but just enough for 2 seats and a walkway. They talked about, well, should it have a minimum square footage, or, you know, it's 2 seats. If they choose to do mini seats, I guess we're out of luck, but hopefully they don't do that.
Well, like I mentioned in the report, that it was mostly about the facade, the building materials, rather than the actual farmhouse style.
So there's.
Can I show some pictures to you guys? I went up into Kaysville to the Sunset Farms, I believe. Took pictures of that whole subdivision.
You wanna
These
plug
are-
in?
Pardon?
You wanna plug in?
Is that an iPhone?
Yeah. Will that work?
There you go.
Yep.
Great. Whoops, I'm hooking on things. Okay. There we go. Okay. There we go. It was that one day. That's all hardy plank.
And see, I think that,
Look at this one. That's all hardy plank. They changed it up. You've got different
but
styles.
see, the first one, I did not like at all.
You don't need
But then
to-
again,
you don't
it
need
doesn't
to
have to
like
be
it,
me,
right?
you're right.
I like every one of these, but I want you to look at the styles. These are Southern colonials, these are East Coast, these are farmhouse. Every one of these is hardy plank, and these are expensive. This is an expensive subdivision. These go up to $1 million, and that's where it ends. But I just want you guys to see that because we've always done something in the past doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement or change or progress. And I believe that this would be a beautiful asset to our community. And so I went driving through, and I've told you before that my sister lives on the East Coast, and when we would go visit in South Carolina, all of these homes are made of hardy plank, and the reason that they choose it, besides the aesthetics, are because it is impervious to, or at least pushes off the mold issue. They have a serious mold issue there. It's rodents and disease and things like that tend to get into the woods and stuff. This stops that from happening, because they used to always use wood, and the hardy plank is the same look, but with a different, with cement. So I just think that if we shut off this new facade and trend, which is actually classic, it's the same as a brick look on the East Coast, where and if we say that no, we're stuck in the stone, or we need some, you know, whatever we want to call it, that specific look, then we're shutting out a very large portion of our population, and especially our younger families who are really, they know what they like, and they're going to go somewhere else. And I have to also tell you that I spoke to somebody who's the president of a development company, and he said, we have people who want to build in Syracuse, but they won't because they won't allow this. And these are $1 million homes. So they said they want this look, they can't do it there, we can't build there. So I think we need to keep that in mind.
So just along with some of those thoughts, because I know this has been brought up by a certain community, but we have to apply this everywhere. So some thoughts with that are considering, okay, if we're really doing this to open up to that style, or like you said, the colonial, or
We have some
And,
farmhouse style that I think this matches.
okay, so but if we're going to open up to that, if we create a third standard rather than eliminating all of our other standards, so doing the option 3, I think is better having an option 3 rather than eliminating the other ones. But then also upping the ante too, of saying, okay, if we're really going to push for a farmhouse type style, we ought to consider really saying, hey, you should do this on the sides, and at least the front at first, and the front and sides.
All visual sides to the
Yes,
street?
because if
I
then
understand.
we're creating
A
also
standard.
a standard. I mean, it's still a great
A standard from the
product
curb.
that lives up to the other ones, and then you can decide, hey, if you really like this, you're going to put the money to do it.
I think that there's merit to what you're saying in that if you're going to use this product on the whole front, you've got to continue, we can't let you cheapen the other sides of the building, because I think one of the reasons that brick, rock, stone has worked so well in the past is even on the back of buildings, you still have to have that lower tier has got to be protected. So you can't like stucco the bottom of your house, even in the rear. So you could
But
like.
you do a plaster. All bases of homes are plaster right here.
No, we require correct stone.
No.
It's just on the front side.
On the foundation itself, you put a
Foundation is all
plaster
and then
on
you
the
don't have to
foundation.
have any brick rock.
The cement that sticks about that far out of the ground.
My neighborhood, they still did,
Some
so
people put it on the back, but the requirement is just
It's
the
on
not
the
there.
requirement
front,
is not there.
the front
I
facade,
thought
but
it was
if it's
still
on a
required.
corner,
It's
it's a
called
wainscot.
charging. It's pretty cheap. You can do it yourself.
Well, all right. I'm concerned about one of the things that this established, the history of this style is of requiring brick, rock, stone on the facade. It has set a precedent that we are only allowing a higher standard product here. Now, I understand there's an argument that says this is not a lower standard product, but in look and feel it mimics it, and that's where I'm a little hesitant, because while the cement and fiberboard is not the lower quality of batten or vinyl, but it still kind of mirrors that look, does that devalue our community? I'm just throwing that out there.
And planning commission did discuss the merits of the different materials, and even the fire marshal stood up and talked about, there's a good, better, best, and where does hardy board land on this spectrum? And by any means, I think everybody agreed it's not a cheap material. It's not the same as vinyl.
Right,
or
sure, it's
wood.
not, or stucco.
But if you compare it to what we call real brick
Real rock.
or real rock,
And they don't even use
it's
real
I
rock.
know,
not
it's
as
very
good,
easy
like
fake.
good, better,
It's not.
best.
Even brick is getting thin.
But yeah, our bricks are
But-
not real bricks.
But then there's all these other variations, like they take the they have the skinny brick that's just shaved off the
Right.
front, and they lay it like tile. And is that masonry? According to our definition, it is. And as
What
far
it
as fire,
accomplishes with the fake brick, though, is it does accomplish a look of a more valuable product throughout the city.
But I completely disagree that this is a less valuable look. If you're going to spend $1 million on a home that's 100% hardy plank, that is not a cheap looking stone. You wouldn't use that.
And that's why I'm saying we should probably do an option 3 so it's available,
Yes.
but we up the ante
And
to
keep
make
the
sure that
others.
it's a good quality product
Okay,
for
but
the whole
consider
city.
that this has to apply to everything. So
Right.
let's say you're saying that you put hardy plank on $1 million home, What happens when you put hardy plank on, 800 square foot
And
home?
it looks fantastic.
See?
You just took your 800 square foot home and you made it worth $500,000.
No.
Magic.
I have
So-
to disagree with that.
I actually think this is a good change. I only have one reservation with hardy plank, and it's a personal one, and that is that you have to paint it every 10 years.
You don't. We've
And
lived in our
I-
home for 15 years and have not needed to paint our home. And I know we've had this discussion. I think I'm the only one on this council or in this room that has hardy plank on their home. Do you have hardy plank?
So it does stand up okay.
Absolutely.
I just
Yeah.
know I sometimes I go into, because they recommend painting it every
Yeah.
10 years. Is
It's
that
on
what
your
it is?
I think they
Website
say,
says-
just like anything, that after, you probably are guaranteed for 10 years, but we're on year 16 now.
Okay.
The statement is true, you do have to paint it. The number, I guess, is where we're debating.
Mhm.
I've heard 25, I guess there's variables, depends
Yeah.
on the
I
paint.
see, I think
Yeah,
that,
it depends on the
Well,
paint.
I
even
think
the
a
best
lo-
paint's
I
only
think-
guaranteed for 30 years.
yeah, I
so-
think stucco you need to refresh after 30
You do,
years.
and you end up with holes in it and you have to fix them.
And so, my thing is, that was my only concern, because I really, really, really hate painting outside. And
So don't get it.
so, but the thing is, the last 30 years, I have stucco in my house, I'm gonna have to replace it in 30
Hire
years, so.
someone, so.
Like, we don't have any issues at all, there are no spots
that's
on
good to
our
hear.
home. And we have dormers where snow settles, and so we should, if there was going to be an issue with rot, with any kind of repair, you'd see it, and we don't have it.
Then my second question is, how does it hold up to a weed whacker?
And you,
Isn't
and,
that- I mean,
Well,
well, you know
brick
what?
does well.
it's gotta be a
Stucco
lot.
does not.
We don't have it next
Well,
door.
Joey's got a point,
Yeah.
like, if people beat up the edge of their house, then we have it.
But are they going to
Good.
take it
No,
all
you
the
have
way
plaster.
down?
I don't know, that's my question
Highly
really.
doubtful, because foundation is gonna be.
Yeah,
off the
you've got your
ground.
foundation.
Council, I'm
you're
gonna give
fine.
you
We have
1
some
minute
tall
to give a
weeds.
recommendation, though.
I recommend we have the 3 options.
I think I agree.
Okay, I just need some clarification. Corinne's throwing out the idea of all 4 sides. Currently, it says just the front.
I think any.
No, I think if you use the hardy board, you've gotta go on
I
all
think
sides.
If there's no other element, that's what I'm saying.
If you
Yes.
use,
All-
if it's mixed with the rock, brick, stone, then it goes to the other ordinance, but
I
I
think-
don't think that you can.
I think 3 sides is as much as I could
I do
get
Yeah,
too,
behind,
not the
because
back.
I
In
got
the
it recommended
backyard.
to me, I was talking to the developer and he's like, no, you should wrap the whole thing, and I'm like, no, that's really
you,
not
you know,
fair."
they can wrap the whole thing,
Yeah,
we're just not gonna
yeah,
require
they're
them
totally
to.
Okay, so
Wrap
what we
the
haven't
whole
talked
thing.
about though here is this, and that is that we had our visioning committee and talked about what style are we, and are we a city that has a style? There has been a lot of discussion about those cities that have enforced a style throughout. I mean, like your Park Cities, your Jackson Holes. And there are always people in those communities who say, the dang city council won't let me build my home in your community, but they made a choice to be that. We've had that choice enforced for years, and we're about to break it. Are we, I'm not saying that that's wrong, I'm just saying, we're now going to go back on what they've spent 30 years trying to say, that all of our homes have a brick, rock, stone element.
I don't think it's definitely something, if you were driving through our city, you'd be like, oh, all these homes have a brick road. I don't think anybody would.
I've
I don't think I've
never
ever
seen
driven
it.
through and be like,
Thought,
this
what
look,
is this?
there's
It
a
looks
common theme in this
different.
city.
No.
Okay, now wait a minute,
Not at
think
all.
about it though.
No.
Let's talk about,
I don't agree.
remember your variation on, the front edge of a property. Nobody really notices it as a specific element, but it does impact you when you drive down a street that everything's the exact same from the curb, or things are slightly varied. It is something you notice, and it's subtle. It is not like everybody goes, oh, I picked that out right away. But it is something that's there. I'm just saying consider it. I'm not saying that I'm even going that way and saying I'm gonna throw it all out because of
So
it.
what are you saying?
I'm saying that there was a conscious choice in the past that we were gonna have this common element.
Well, that's what I'm
And
saying, but
if we're going to abandon it,
But
we
we're
have
not
to be-
abandoning it.
I just think the difference here is,
we're allowing it not to be consistent anymore with that standard.
I would argue that all we're doing is allowing the hardy board to go further down the facade than it already does, but
Yes.
all, that style is already here.
It's here.
absolutely.
And I've seen
it's
it all
new,
over.
And
It's
and
not in our
it's very
community.
sought after.
Yeah,
Yes, it
it
is.
is.
Council, what
How is it in our community if it's not?
Council, what I'm hearing is an option 3
Yeah.
Yes.
with 3 sides.
Yes,
Yeah.
Doesn't hear?
and
Okay.
if they'd like to go 4, great.
Yes.
We're here to speak to this point, with an architect, and I mean, the 3 sides is a little bit of a point we'd like to say something too.
And I'll give you 3 minutes, since it's 3-sided.
One minute per side. I mean, I couldn't agree more with what you're talking about. The hardy board is not a lesser material than stone or brick or anything. I work on multiple $1-million homes all the time.
Bring them here.
Sometimes sometimes they're all stucco. I mean, a lot of people, don't like stucco. I can show you some really amazing examples of 100% stucco homes. So the question about the material, look, it becomes subjective at one point. What you like personally may not be what I like, and everybody at this table might have a different opinion. It's totally subjective. Good design is good design. It's always going to find a fan somewhere. The issue about requiring the 3 sides or 4 sides of hardy, where we run into a problem with that is just in a lot of these scenarios where we're building pretty tight homes on pretty tight lots where the space between the homes is not really visible from the street at all. We're going to increase the cost of our homes so that down,
10 feet.
down, what typically mostly happens is,
Yeah.
people will put fences, 10 feet back or 5 feet back from the facade of their house. Anything beyond that fence, behind that fence, no one sees, no one can see. And so we're gonna increase the cost of our house $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 just so that we can require us to apply a material that's on the front. We're willing to wrap it back the sides a certain amount so that it doesn't just stop, because I'm a huge, that's a huge irritation for me when people just terminate materials on outside corners. So we're willing to wrap it, but to make it required to go all the way down the side of buildings. Now, where we're on a street corner, absolutely, 100% we'll continue the style all the way down that street corner. But where we've got 2 homes and they're this far apart and they go back, it's hard for us to justify, hey, the cost of your house just went up 20 grand because the city required us to put a material on there that no one can even see.
So what do you do for the rest of the way back?
Well, in our case, sometimes we will full wrap it, but what you require right now is stucco. We might do stucco. We might do a wainscot of some sort with stucco above it. We might wrap the whole thing. But to require us to spend more money on this more expensive material where it's not visible at all and where you already are allowing other people, if we had put a brick wainscot on it of thin brick on the front, you would allow us to wrap the rest of the 3 sides with 100% stucco. But if we're choosing to do a particular style that, to be honest, in all of the styles that our company offers, this is the most popular one and our most expensive one. People are willing to pay more money to have all hardy board. And then, again, if we were to, follow the guidelines, we put 30% of thin brick on the front, and now I can wrap the other 3 sides in stucco. It just doesn't.
I agree. I see your point.
It puts a burden on us that we have to pass on to our home buyers, and so.
So if we're saying if you're on a street corner, then anything that's visible to the.
Absolutely, and we would do that anyway.
Would do that.
We would do that
And
even if you
then
didn't
otherwise,
want
if they're
But if
next
we
to
don't
each other.
codify it.
No, I get it, you're not worried, yeah, I know you're not worried
The
about
next
us.
guy doesn't
Kinda good.
follow it.
Yeah.
Everything has to be.
Yeah, no,
So
I
it has
agree.
to be anything that's street corner and seen by the public, or that is not just seen by the public, but is on a fully visible
Right.
area. That would be done in cementous board.
Yes,
Cementatious?
Cementitious, my
Cementatious, thank you. And then, but I agree that you should be able to, especially if our homes are not even that far apart, there isn't anybody that's going to be saying, oh, that detracts from the look.
I'm okay with that, but I would like, to his point, I would prefer that in all of our codes, we don't allow, style changes on a outside corner.
that absolutely should be it, if you don't already do that one, you should.
The only
I think
question,
we all do.
see,
I don't think you
So
do.
those are so close that
these
those
are,
two would
these are
know.
much closer.
Uh-huh.
So on an outside corner, you should,
Yeah.
On a
Here's the
corner lot,
problem.
you have to continue around the side.
Is
of
it
your
very
house.
wrapping
What
for
you're
us?
saying
We
is,
require a
if-
wainscot on
no,
that.
no, no,
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
2 foot,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what
So
most cities
somebody
do,
said
they
they
require a
want
2 foot
to-
return on outside corners.
Yeah.
So if I've got hardy board going across the facade, I have to return it 2 feet, then I can have a piece of hardy trim, and then I can convert to stucco or some other material.
Hey, Council, I'd like to go back to your discussion now, thank you for
Yeah.
that input.
So that's what you're proposing, or? Sorry.
I'm not, I'm saying we would be willing to do that. If you'll allow us, we will promise not to terminate materials on outside
But
corners,
we
we'll
will
wrap
have
it.
to set
We
an
can't,
actual.
we have to codify
Yeah.
it.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
in option
put
3, you
that,
can
write
say
that in
wrap
the,
it.
That's
write that
great.
in the code.
but see, I would actually like to expand it beyond section 3, that I really don't like it when, I think it doesn't look good when you terminate on a corner. When you'd have one corner of this, and then, to his point, it looks much better if you require whatever durable
To
surface
wrap.
to wrap,
To
I think you
how
said
many
2 feet
feet?
back.
Most municipalities require 2 foot returns.
So
I-
let's figure
I
that
think
out.
that really depends though on the way it is, because it really needs to go back to whatever the fence line is. You put your fence line at 2 feet, that's fine, but if you put your fence 6 feet back and you terminate and then you put your
But
fence.
then you can't control a fence
The
because
problem
that's
is most
not
people
part
don't
of
put
our,
fences in
right?
when the
If
builder
they
doesn't
can't
do the
afford it
fence.
for a couple of years. So we don't know where those fences are
And they can
gonna
put the
go, and
fence
they're not
anywhere they want.
required,
I
yeah.
understand.
And they may not even
Give
put
me-
that.
Yeah.
Give me a
Lucky we don't
return,
know that.
give me a length of, a percentage or some kind of a measurement on that return. Seems like you all are in agreement that we don't end at the end of the corner, that we do some kind of wrapping.
Would it be appropriate to do it, according to the distance between homes? So if you've got 16 feet between homes, you have to go back a little further because you can see around the home, whereas if you only have, I'm just saying, if you've got more distance between the home, you have to go back further?
How do you
10%,
how do you
10% of the
foresee
distance.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, you enforce it.
Cause if you have one house that's built and then someone else buys a completely different house,
And builds a year
and
later, how do you?
builds a year later and moves it closer.
You just need to come up with a
That's
number.
true, you don't know
Make it
how
5
far.
feet, make it 2 feet,
Right.
whatever.
Okay,
Yeah, you're right, it needs to be
Okay, give me a number.
specific for each home, not dependent.
Give me a number.
2 feet.
4 feet.
This is dark.
Yes.
I'm okay with the recommendation from someone that actually
Yeah,
designs
who does
houses
it
and goes
too.
to.
Okay, but here's the deal, like, what they have in the packet though, is a lot closer than what they actually have in their lots in there, and we're talking about all of Syracuse, not just
Yeah.
their community.
Mhm.
I agree with you.
And then the fact too, that if you want a look, you need to see it, you'll see it above the fence line, especially for a 2-story house.
Yeah.
So, 2-story, yeah.
I don't
that's
agree.
I think I'm with Corinne on this one.
Don't agree with what?
That just going to a certain point, that on a 2-story house, especially with wider
So you're still on
setbacks,
3 sides.
on 3 sides, that's what I'm saying, because we don't allow the front facade in the first place, so we're saying, hey, we're gonna allow this for those people who are
We're
knocking down the
making an
door,
exception.
you
Then
really
you'll
want
need a
it.
But right
completely
now-
new, you'll need a completely new number then, which says you can have the front entire facade be hardy plank and your sides can be made of stucco, which is what they're allowed to do now, but without the full hardy plank.
Right
Is
now,
that what we wanna do?
if they do a full brick front, they
Yeah.
can do a full stucco side.
I get that,
This
I
is a
get
completely
that.
different
Yeah.
standard that we're trying to force on them.
And that's the point,
Well,
this
no,
is a
they're-
whole different
They came
standard.
to us for a new standard.
Right.
Agreed.
And we're the ones
Option 3.
deciding,
Yeah.
okay? So.
But option 1 and 2 are still currently available.
Yeah.
David,
Yeah,
tell me,
no, we're
tell me
not
your feelings.
undoing 1 and 2.
I agree with Corinne.
Okay, 3 sides,
Yep.
Jordan?
I think that, a wrap to 2 feet, or if you wanna put maybe 10% of the side length, an average home is 20 feet, I don't know, 20 feet deep, and that would be, 10% would be 2 feet, so that would work. But if it's a huge house, it should probably go back a little bit farther.
Yeah, then
And usually huge
20% is
houses
form-based.
are on larger lots that would then get your spacing. So if it's a larger home, the wrap would be required to go further back.
But you're saying just a return as
Yes.
opposed to all.
10% return.
And I agree with that, I
Gotta ring
think that,
to
I
it.
don't want it to be cost prohibitive to have this new facade, because I think it adds value to our neighborhoods to have this option. So I want the front to be able to be 100% hardy plank, and I like the percentage, which is a little more, form-based, if we're saying specific to the home, a percentage of wrap on either side. Unless it goes all the way, unless it's on a corner, and then that whole side needs to be covered.
So you're.
We're kind of split.
You're
Two and
kind of
two.
split, okay, this is
Yeah.
what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna table this discussion until we have a fifth member.
Yes, sir.
There's all that pressure.
That's all I need
Until we have a fifth member.
You ready for
And
that?
however it
So work
lands, it'll
session
be
again.
fine.
Work session,
Yeah.
okay.
I'll be fine however it goes.
Work session yet in January, Cassie, would you put down on the work session? Item J, introduction of Americans with Disability, that's Paul.
Thanks, guys. So this is a first read, hopefully you read the staff report. This is a transition plan and self-evaluation. It's required under federal law. As far as we know, we haven't done one yet, so that's why we're doing one now. This has taken about a year and a half of collecting a lot of information. Robert's department did a really good job identifying every single crossing in the city that the city maintains. We also went through every city facility, identified potential barriers to accessibility. So the plan is to help us ensure that we start correcting those barriers and removing those barriers. And then once you're kind of in the plan, then you're caught up. So we're still gonna get caught up. We're a little behind on that. So again, this is first read. The thought I had is we'd like to have a hearing on this just in case anyone would like to give input on it. So if we could schedule that for January, and then allow some public comment period. Just if anyone in the community is interested in giving comment, we let them do it, and then have it approved for in February for a final vote, hopefully. Yeah, any questions? This wouldn't be this would be like a guiding document. So when we were looking at budget, for instance, and you're looking at potential ramp projects, this list is a good way to go. It's like, okay, we really could we've got only 4 ramps or 4 spots where there's no ramps in the city and they're right in front of City Hall. Maybe we'll make that a priority, because that's right in front of us. Anyway, it's prioritized, and a lot of these
It's amazing.
is on the 5-year capital plan, so they will be addressed in the next 5 years as long as we stick with that plan. There's quite a few of those, 100 or so. In any case, that's the inventory, and again, first read. So if there are specific things you'd like to talk about today, let me know. If there are things.
I just like to say that for a first read, this was pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, well,
And
It's been a year
so,
in the
Wow.
making.
I kind of felt like, thank you, you gave me so much, I didn't need to add much, or anything, really. I'm ready to say good job and go forward.
Amazing.
Well, every department did their part, so yeah, I appreciate the support.
That's a lot of work.
No, and it's a lot of work, and thank you to all those who did it. So I feel very comfortable having, this is like the most prepared document.
Yeah, and
I
and
didn't
it's
put the
it's
pictures
like
in.
a full, it's a
I
full
didn't put the pictures in
inventory,
yet.
in its own way, it's an
It's gonna look even better.
Even better.
Okay,
My only problem is for a plan, it's a little long.
It is, well, yeah, it is long.
well, but this is the type of thing that has to address very specific things.
I know, I
I
can't.
can allow it here.
I can't enforce the 15-page requirement here.
That's our list.
If our list is long, then obviously we got a lot of work.
We got some work to do, but no, this was fantastic.
Council, you all right if we schedule that hearing for
Yes.
for December?
Yes.
I have to
January?
tell you, a friend of mine is blind, and he showed a picture up on social media that was a braille sign that they had put under plastic and with a glass facade to protect it. It was in a building just somewhere around here, and we just laughed about it, but, yeah, that seems like someone
Okay,
got a little.
Less effective.
Less
Let's
effective.
let's move to K.
Turning up the volume.
The rewrite of the city ordinances with alcoholic beverages. Is that Paul?
That's me too, yep.
And that was also very well done.
Well, I wanted to, I didn't know how conversant you were with alcohol and alcohol establishments. So I wanted to make sure it was.
Surprisingly, some of us are not very, and that's one of the things I felt reading this. I'm like,
I wasn't
not
before I
really.
started working for cities. So, yeah, so as I was looking, we recently had an alcohol code change. And as we were looking through the alcohol code, we just said, man, this is really out of date. The state code keeps changing, and we have not kept up with it. As I looked at it, I recommend just, let's rewrite it. Let's start, and
Yes.
let's make it make sense, so they can match the state code.
Yeah.
Yes.
And let's remove parts that don't really advance anything.
okay, so my first thought was, how do we do this in a way that maybe attaches to the state code so that we're not constantly having to rewrite to keep up with their changes? Cause I kind of see this is one of those
It's gonna
hot
keep
topics
changing for a
with
while.
legislature, so they're gonna keep addressing it.
Yeah.
I'd rather not. I'd rather just say whatever the
Well-
state code is, we're gonna follow.
I think, yeah, I like to adopt, state code by reference as much as we can. So
Yeah.
as amended, let's adopt this, so like definitions is one that, they got so many definitions in the code, we could just keep all those.
So, what can we do to make it more like that, so that we don't have to keep addressing? Cause I would hate to come back even 2 years from now and say, oh, we gotta go through this all again, because.
Yeah, I wouldn't wanna rewrite it, I think if we keep on top of it, the thing that would probably change the most in state code would be the types of establishments and the types of licenses.
Right.
And that'd be something where if you wanna give clear direction to staff on whether you have the consent or not, we really need to keep in line with the state code. So if
Well-
someone says, I wanna do a beer only restaurant, we know what they're talking about.
I guess that's the other point, is that over and over, state code says that cities can't restrict beyond the state code. So
Yeah.
if that's the case, why am I trying to?
Well, we can't,
We can actually add things
Yeah.
to it.
In
As
most
we-
cases,
As I
we
was reading
can't.
through, there were some
Right.
things that said, but you can,
Yeah.
like, we can
You don't-
make things harder.
If you don't
Yeah.
wanna grant the
Basically.
license, you don't have to.
Like right now, we don't allow bars in the city, so if
Yeah.
you wanted to allow bars, you could, but we don't allow it, and the state code allows us to say no to bars.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
That's why we have no bars.
Didn't you read it?
So the state code, I did read that, but I was just kind of thinking, I kind of read it the other way.
Oh,
The state code says that we have to allow strip clubs, and yet we can deny bars?
Yes, that's the
I'd
First
rather we'd
Amendment.
be able to reverse that.
That's the First Amendment issue, that's just it's a constitutional issue.
getting drunk
I've dealt with that in
necessarily
Southland, too.
a right
Oh.
artistic level or something, you know?
You can't say this is my.
So one of the, it's purely a
For
First
sure,
Amendment issue, there's lots of case law on it.
Development goes down.
But we're here to talk about alcohol tonight.
Sorry.
I know she had pictures in this one, so
Yes.
this is beautifully.
I did put some pictures just to help.
Good
provide
sign.
picture
Pictures of
section.
what?
So one of the big, policy directions I'd really like to get, if you're okay with me starting, I've already sort of outlined kind of where I'd like to go, with a new code. But one of the big things is, we've got a list here of types of uses, and we are allowed to say yes or no. Now, if there's one that's established and we've previously allowed it, we'll have to continue to allow them to stay, but if we wanna allow no more, we can say, turns out we really don't like limited service restaurants, or, restaurant liquors, as we call them, under our code. Then we could say no more, we're done. So it'd be really helpful if I could get some direction on specific types of licenses and whether you would like to change our stance. There's some where I don't see that we have a compatible section at all, so I'd like to get direction on yes or no as a first question. Whether we do that all tonight, or whether you just think about it, that's fine. There's no rush, there's no one asking us to change this. This is sort of a staff-driven, there's a need for a change, so we'd like to. This will probably take 6 months, that's what I
Is that what
figured.
you tell me?
What?
Staff has plans to party?
I'll never tell.
Staff has plans
So-
to comply with state law. That's the extent of our party.
Once we get this in line, it'll be really helpful
You're
for,
all right,
for Heather and the business licensing, cause then someone will come in and say, I would like a full-service restaurant, and instead of trying to match
Yes.
things that aren't really match, we will have it, it'll specifically say, full-service restaurant,
And this is the definition.
not allowed, or yes allowed, whatever.
Right.
I got you.
So, that's the biggest, policy direction right now, is which of these
So
do
let me
you
ask
want
you
to not
on,
allow? Yeah,
on
let's-
state code, isn't there a limit to, number of those things? It's not like unlimited, so
Yeah.
once there's at least it used to be that way, that once a number of permits were reached, you couldn't, allow more. Is that a city-driven thing or a state-driven thing?
So there's a number of state licenses.
It
and-
used to be
and,
state.
Yeah, there are still caps on those, it's a population cap, so every year as our population rises, there are more licenses that open up. They also allow sale of licenses, so people can transfer licenses to other places. So if you really had someone who really wanted to locate here, they might be able to find a license they could buy from another location that was closing and locate it under state code.
Okay.
So yeah, there
So
are caps.
what kind of limits are those? Because that kind of affects my ability to not allow or allow.
Well, except for the fact though, that if, say for instance, you're talking about just a restaurant that serves wine.
Right.
Okay, so if, say, some guy, like it said in here, wants to retire,
He
can't
could sell
sell,
his.
well, not necessarily, cause the new guy has to apply for a license too, and if you have a hard cap, he cannot get a license while the other guy, that
But he
license
would be
belongs to the
grandfathered in.
person, not to the
Oh, not to
establishment.
the
Yeah, use is grandfathered, but not a
Yes.
license. Licenses are different.
Right.
So you could allow transfer of city licenses.
Right.
The state allows it, so, currently we don't allow transfers in the city. So if that's something that you're open to, if you're gonna have a cap, it's a good idea to have a transferability.
If you're gonna have them, I think.
If
Right.
you're not gonna have a cap, then it
Yeah.
doesn't matter, because
Otherwise you
they
have
don't,
to
they
address
just
that.
apply.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
nobody's gonna say, hey, yeah,
Right.
I gotta own this restaurant forever and ever and ever, and breed
Right.
beef to my children, and they might never ever get a license. Just saying.
So what kind of help do you need from them this evening, Paul?
So, I mean, we've got this list of uses, I mean, we
Go
could.
through your list.
If we can go through, yeah, so banquet and catering, that's the first one on the list, we don't really have anything comparable.
We need
Would
to-
you be okay with
I
allowing?
think we should
uh,
be okay allowing
research,
this.
okay?
Should.
That's good. How about, a bar? That would be dining, equity, or fraternal, so, that would be, they would require sale of food, but it wouldn't be one that requires percentages.
So
I've
what,
gotta
does
figure
that
it.
have to be open that far? I mean, like, could we allow dining but not fraternal? I'm asking.
Yeah, I know, it's a good
I
question.
think you probably
don't know,
could, yeah,
but-
there's a
but could you
specific
get
type of
sued, though?
license.
Well, that's why I'm asking, I don't wanna get sued.
Yeah.
Because, for example, I mean, when you think about this, I would be very much in favor of allowing a restaurant to open up that also served alcohol, if that was gonna help us.
That's
not
covered
this.
down here.
That's not this.
Well, it says a bar, a dining,
But dining,
Let's
a
see,
percentage of
that's,
dining is
that's
not
under
required.
restaurant liquor or restaurant
That's why I
beer.
got, that's why I got
They
these
could
cool pictures
serve you
and
pretzels.
okay.
there's a ton of licenses and it's a little confusing.
I would like to keep the bar as is, as a no. I don't want a place that's dedicated
I
for
don't wanna-
someone to go and drink and
I don't
then
wanna
drive
allow
home.
specific clubs to open up that are private.
I'd say probably no on the bar.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm a
and
no
especially
also.
with the makeup of Syracuse, even just our layout, we have so much residential everywhere. There isn't a specific, like if you're going to Layton, you've got Olive Garden that's not surrounded by homes or, you know, even
And there's.
very
But
far
we
from
could
any
get that
of
on
them.
a city edge somewhere, that's why I'm kind of.
But
that's
leaving that
covered
door
down
open,
here.
Because what happens if it's on the edge of,
Yeah,
like,
we're
say,
talking like
Clearfield?
a tavern or a bar, like where people
Right.
come in and
Yeah.
they order alcohol generally, they might get.
And
They go
something
there to
outside.
drink.
But yeah, drinking is the main.
Yeah,
They're
and that's
not-
why
they're
I
not
would
really
say that I
ordering
don't know that we have a
Right.
place in
I
Syracuse
understand.
for that.
Yeah, I would still say no.
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
But an Olive, like I say, if you, to use your Olive Garden example, that is a restaurant full service.
No, I'm not saying that, I'm just thinking that, I mean, I would restrict it with zones, but let's say somebody like wanted to open one next to this, I don't know, down on the south border of the city or on the edge
But you
of
can't,
another city.
you can't just pick one little place.
Well, if there's, what I'm saying is if it was zoned properly, we would have to restrict it by only
A
a
lot
zone.
of times, I think in the past, we've, you know, a lot of cities have said they're industrial area. Well,
Right.
ours is sprinkled in a lot of areas, like on Allen, and then one over on SR 193.
It's 193.
I guess I'm
It's
trying not to be
probably-
somebody else's conscience, I'm trying to say.
Well, and I
No.
don't think that's a,
For me, it's a public safety thing.
yeah, I'm just thinking if we have a constant access of kids and people coming and going, that's why I say it's one thing if you're kind of removed from homes, but it's another when you're not. So I'm trying to think of where we are not around homes.
And see, for me, it's if someone is going to location to drink, that means they have to get home from that location. If someone goes to a restaurant and has a drink while they're there, I'm good with that. But if they're going somewhere to drink and then there's a chance they'll be driving 10 minutes
We
later,
don't really have transit.
I don't want that. But I'm okay with restaurants.
I guess, okay, I'm,
That's my,
all right.
mine has nothing to do with morality or
I'm
anything
short on
like
time.
it.
Okay.
No, it
Okay,
doesn't.
sweet.
Okay, here's what I'm running out of time, so here's what I'd like to do. Let's put a pin in this. I'll start working on the ordinance, on that. Let's see,
Hotel, yes.
transfer of license, does that
Yeah.
seem like,
Hotel, yes.
caps and licenses, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think
Do
we
you
need
wanna
a
put
cap
hard
on
caps,
licenses
do you wanna
yet.
have no hard caps?
I'd say
Yeah, I don't think
no
we need to
hard-
mess with that right now.
I don't see us where we're gonna have so many restaurants that we need to
We,
restrict
at
it.
some point, well,
It needs to be based on population.
at some point there would be a need, and so,
But would we have to come up with a number now?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so we could
Sometimes
just
it's a
say,
concentration too.
Or-
yeah, and maybe I would leave that open.
Or based on population per
Yeah.
extra 1,000
Yeah.
people, you allow one or something like that, or.
per 5,000?
So
Yeah,
right
depending
now,
on- you could do it per license, you could say, you know, for restaurants, here, we're doing, for if you allow bars,
Oh,
or
I
for bars,
see.
you can have it
Yeah.
associated with.
Okay,
Okay, I guess that's me, are there any things that you saw in the staff report that you really wanted, you know, addressed, nuisances, or, we've got the prohibition of home brewing. But which is a lot understated, because
So
that's.
it's
well,
allowed.
see, that's one of those that I'm like, you know, we can't enforce it.
No.
Can you really
Yeah.
enforce it?
No.
You can
So why
prohibit,
put anything in there that you can't enforce?
we could keep the prohibition of selling, beer at a public dance. That's in our
What's
code
that?
now, public dances, you're not allowed to sell beer. I don't know if we have public
State
dances
dance?
anymore.
We don't have public.
It's in our code currently, so, you know,
They are open to the public.
are you allowed to spit on the sidewalk?
what?
No,
I'm just kidding.
no.
Okay, here,
I can dance.
I'm getting the vibe that you're okay with, I'm gonna start work on the ordinance, before I get too far into the weeds on lots of details, I'll bring you back to bones.
Okay.
And then we can start adding to the bones.
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Yep.
It sounds
Thank you,
well.
appreciate
Thank you
it.
for
Thank you.
taking this up and recognizing the problem and being proactive.
And I think the thing that I heard is, let's see what we can do to parallel state code.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
more than anything, yeah.
Make it easy.
Let's go to L. And this is District 3 water.
Yeah,
That's
I'll start
right.
that and then I'll fill in the holes. Okay, last time we talked about this, you expressed an interest in making sure that we don't create something where, someone who wants to develop property comes in and does sort of a half effort on trying to accumulate
Yes.
water shares and then says, well,
I'll just go the cheaper way and
Yeah.
buy it out, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not cheaper for them, but it's
But it
less
puts the
headache.
burden on us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's less headache for them and would, in the future, create a higher burden on us,
Yes.
financially, yes. So we looked into it more as you directed, and, we came up with a couple things. First of all, we did some research on how much land is out there.
It doesn't have water.
That is to be developed or could be developed. Some of it likely won't, like some of it's owned by the sewer district.
Right.
Some of it may, some of it probably won't, but we calculated what's out there versus the water shares that are still out there. And it turns out it's pretty even. Now, it wasn't an exact calculation, so there could be a margin of error there, so we looked at it conservatively, you know, if our estimates were high on one end and low on the other. We saw that there could be as much as a 250 share deficit. That could look a lot of different ways. If it were to just, all the shares were to switch over and all that land would have been developed, and then we'd have 250 shares deficit, and we allowed developers to contract that water with Weaver Basin instead of give us shares, then that came out to be roughly a difference of $100,000 per year. Now in the future, we're gonna have a lot more homes to spread that over, so it calculated down to about a 59-cent per month impact.
Is that with the 14,000 homes?
Yeah.
What do we have
Yeah.
now?
8,500.
Okay.
And I don't even think 14,000 is built out, but just to throw
And
out
we wouldn't
a
need those
future number.
shares till later anyway, correct?
Correct.
Mhm.
Now, what that means is, I don't think there's a huge disparity in water versus land. However, timing is where it gets complicated, cause some lands will want to develop before others. And so what we've got here is what you would call a tight market, a water market. And so what we could do, remember, we have this legal counsel that has told us that we can't really prevent development by saying you can't get contract water. So we do have to, because the water's there, there is wet water out there to get. And so we can't artificially say it's not there. And so, we do have to provide a method. So what we came up with was a couple of steps before they can contract the water, rather than give us shares. So first of all, if the land that they wanna develop has water rights or water shares associated with it, then we require shares. They cannot contract.
Right.
So that's the baseline requirement. Okay, if the current land does not have enough water shares, then we go to, a search basically to see if they transferred away their water shares in the last 5 years.
So it's a whole wide.
Right, so they
So
kinda
they
created
can't
their own
hoard the
problem.
water
Uh-huh.
and leave the, yeah.
They
Yeah.
shot themselves in the foot.
They kinda created their own problem,
That's good.
and then, in that case, we would say, sorry, you'll have to wait. And then finally, if the land has just historically not had enough water shares, then this is where we can provide some sort of buffer in the market so that it can flow. And they can, it can,
They can still
we're not
develop.
preventing water, and so, yeah. We thought about throwing out a percentage, so what we would say is, a percentage of the water shares that you're missing, you have to go out and find shares for. So, for example, let's say they only have 50% of the water that they need. Then we would say, of that remaining 50%, you have to go out and find whatever number we decide is appropriate, 85, 75% of that has to come from a water share that you get from someone, and then you can contract for 25% of it,
Okay.
as an example.
That works.
And so I think that's a way, and we can try it out. If it becomes, feasible, then we're limiting our exposure to the higher District 3 water.
I like this better.
I
But,
do too.
but we're not preventing it.
Maybe that will get word back that it's just impossible, you can't even find a single share, and then that, we need to reevaluate whether we lower the percentage or do something else. Cause again, yeah, we can't task them with an impossible task.
Okay, so with this plan, will we be notified, like if a development comes on and says, hey, I don't have enough water, will you bring it to us and say, what do you want to do? Or do you want this to be a plan in place?
So it would be sort of automatic.
Okay.
You would set the bar, so we would say what percentage of that remaining water has to come from shares.
So we'd only hear if
And then-
they couldn't meet any of these steps.
You'd probably hear in complaints and petitions and
Because they couldn't.
it'll show up on an agenda and, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
That
that's
kind
what
of
I'm getting.
Yeah, we're trying to be proactive here, but if water does run out, the brakes will be like,
Yeah.
and then we'll hear
Moratoriums will
about it.
occur.
People will get vocal.
And like Cody said, he showed me this, a bit ago. I'll get to you, Mike. He showed this, to me a bit ago, and it really is a timing issue. The discrepancies between the water that is out there and the land to develop is pretty evenly matched, but the problem is that it might not be for that one piece.
That's short.
Trying to have a solution for that one piece development.
Question then, if, for instance, 10 years later, we end up with some other shares to distribute like we need and don't need this District 3 water, can we say we don't need that anymore? I mean,
We could adjust it at that point.
Under the current agreement, no, once
You're locked in, you're locked in forever.
No, I thought you meant we won't need to accept it in the first place from the developer. Maybe I
She's
missed
saying,
Once we accept
she's saying
it,
if we're contracted for water, can we later get out of it? And
Oh,
the answer's no.
right,
So
right,
that's
right.
Mike
Once
is
we
the water
take it,
master
we
for
take
Layton
it.
now. Mike?
You're already at a point where there's not enough water. There are already developers calling me, asking if I have anybody who would like to sell it, and no one will. So you're already at the point that Noah just pointed out, where the brakes are gonna start going on. The other point is, this District 3 water, which is $432 per acre foot per year, is gonna be cheap in 10 years.
Yeah, cause District
Next-
4 water is almost,
The next water
ready.
that comes out from Weaver Basin is going to be much higher. They predicted that by 2040, it'll be $1,000 an acre foot per year for the future water development.
We're paying about 75
Right now, the
bucks or
shares
something,
that you're
so-
getting
Right now.
donated, that's the wrong word, I don't know, but, they have to give it to the city.
yeah.
Santa Claus.
They go from what it's currently subsidized agricultural use. It's only $16 an acre foot per year for agricultural use. When the city takes it, it becomes secondary use. This year, for 2020, it's gonna be $77 an acre foot. The golf course has to pay that same price, because we're both considered secondary use. So it's, and by the way, in the since 2013, price has gone from 47 to 77. So it's going up even for the current water that you're getting. And so,
Yeah, we
as
know.
I said, that $432 will seem pretty cheap.
So this actually gives them the option to go that route if they can't find the other stuff.
The other point I would like to make is, currently, people are paying $5,000 an acre foot for these shares that they have to give to the city. If you go this route and capitalize for 10 years, that'll reduce the price down to $4,320 over 10 years, you know, that they'll have to pay for a 10-year capitalization. If it were me, and I'm not on your council, I would capitalize it to a point that would keep the price equivalent with Davis Weaver per acre foot. That's how Clayton Canal sets their prices, to be equivalent with Davis Weaver. If you go with a 10-year capitalization, it's gonna lower the price to the point where they'll all wanna come with this plan. They won't wanna go out and look for other water.
So we might have to go 12 or 15 years or whatever.
Okay, yeah, got it.
Okay.
I wanna thank Noah and Brody, they've spent a lot of time on this. You want other things, want answers from them?
Just sort of a consensus on where you think that threshold should be as far as the percentage that
As low as possible.
they would need to come up with from shares on the percentage of their gap. that they-
Oh, the gap as high as possible. I want them to,
Cover their gap?
Yeah.
yeah, I wanna cover their gap as much as they can. I want to avoid District 3 water as much as possible.
So do we wanna try like 80%?
85? Do we dare go 90?
Do I hear 86?
Do I hear 90? I mean, and how far do you feel like we could go? I mean,
Well,
what's the point
it's
where
hard
they-
to tell right now.
It's gotta be realistic, we just heard
Yeah.
there's zero available, so if you've got,
See,
And
I'm
with
worried that
zero
we set 80 and
available.
come back and say, well, that's impossible, you're gonna have to go back to 60 or 50.
It may happen.
But I'd love to go to 90 and have them pull it off. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. All I know is I think you have to set a bar, and where we set it, it may be some trial and error, just to
Put
kind
it
of
at
see what
85.
works. So,
I was gonna say 75, but if everyone wants 85, that's fine.
I think 75 is a little more realistic. If there's zero.
Yeah, if there's
And
nothing
it's-
available.
I don't think any of it's realistic if there's zero
Are
available.
we, are we just shooting a number out there? Is there some, is
Yeah.
there some
It
feasibility?
seems
I feel like we're shooting out a number.
I say
Well,
17.
I mean, we could go
42.
talk to developers, but,
No.
Answer to life.
or,
Universe,
I
everything.
Yeah.
did, you know, I put a letter out to every shareholder also asking, saying, I am willing to buy shares if you have any available. And, I've got some responses, just curious what this is all about and why, but
We'll pay for water.
nobody's interested in selling.
obviously, this is a market, and there is a price where those shares shake loose.
Right.
Obviously, the offers are not high enough to where they've shaken loose, so those share prices will go higher to a point to
Yeah.
where the developer will pay a higher price and get those shares.
Either that or he says, I want the money now
So
because I
I
don't
think
want
the
my
mayor
kids to
brings
have
up a
it.
good point. I wish there was some real data that we could base our number on. We're kind of shooting.
That's
from the
where
hip.
I'm uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah,
we're-
I agree
agree.
with you.
Well, we can go back and see what we
But
can.
if we're
dig
gonna
up.
just grab something out of the air for theory, the 80-20 rule works. So I would start with 80 and see, and then we look for some real data. If there's real data that supports that they're gonna be hard pressed to get 50, maybe we have to move our number.
My concern is, how do we defend it? If we just pull the number out of the air.
I absolutely agree.
I agree, but where do we get a number from?
We'll say we use the 80-20.
Well, I think,
I mean, where do we get a number from?
I think we're okay
Sure,
because
that's
we are becoming less restrictive regardless, even if it's
Right.
95. we're being less restrictive than we are today.
And that's
by
my
allowing
thinking
this.
is by trying to say, we're trying to work with you, but we still expect you to find the water shares. That's where I wanna lean towards a higher number, but we need to find some data point to base it on in
Okay.
the future.
Yeah, let's go back and see what else we can.
Yeah, I'm okay if it's difficult, but we can't make it impossible.
But we won't know until we figure out something more.
That's why I agree, I think
What
it's.
is impossible?
It's truly, in the end, we're gonna be putting out a number, and then we're going to see if it works, and
And
then
then we're gonna have to
And
adjust.
then we're not gonna
Yeah.
know until they
Yes,
respond.
like I said, there may be some trial and error, but.
Right.
There are
let's see
a
if
lot of
maybe
things we
narrow
can
it
dig in
down.
and find data points.
Guess and
for. I'm
check
not sure
is
where
a
to
valid
find this one.
mathematical method.
It is, it is.
Sure, really?
We were all taught it in junior high and high school.
Yeah.
You're right, and then some of us stuck with that our whole lives.
Okay, I'd recommend that we wait till, Councilman Teague is on with all of his wisdom to work with my decision.
I'm expecting him to solve lots of
Lots of
problems.
Perfect.
So,
And
Are we
to
done
that
with this
matter,
one?
welcome
Yes.
aboard for next
so
time.
I called and requested, the general plan be on the agenda. Is there a reason why it was not placed on the agenda?
It is.
It is.
It's on there.
It is?
Yeah.
Is it not on this
It's not
one?
on this one.
Next.
It's on the amendment.
It's on the.
Okay, so it's not on this one, okay, good.
But yeah, the one that we sent to you that's in your packet.
That's
Okay.
right.
It's there.
It's there.
That's what I thought, and
It's
I
been
was
advertised.
looking at this.
Only you wanted to quit.
I just wanna make sure we weren't done,
No, we're not.
because I thought there was one more.
Yes,
Why-
you
bigger
wanted,
plan?
you wanted to discuss, medium density housing and RPC. Or mix,
Ready, go.
go.
On the general plan.
On
So,
the general plan.
actually, on the general plan, I wanted to look at the low density, and I think that the RPC and PRD should be taken out of the low density zone.
Even if they're single family.
Well, only because if someone is, if we wanna change the zone such that if you're in an R1, R2, R3 zone, that you're required to do single-family homes and without, it just, what I've had a lot of people approach me with is that the new general plan has zero protection for existing homes if you put RPC and PRD in the low
In an
density
low
zone.
density zone.
And so I just wanted to get your opinion on this. I think we should take
It's
RPC
more-
and PRD out of the low density. I'm fine with it in the medium density, but the low density, I think it should be limited to R1, R2, R3. There should be a zone in our city for just those zones.
So the low density does not have, PRD in it. It's just-
Yeah, we
It's
took
just
it out.
RPC.
Just RPC?
And RPC
They
is
don't have it
because
up
they're
there.
single family homes, they're not attached, they don't have to be attached, that's the reason why, it's in low, because it's not townhomes, it's not apartments, it's not.
So that was the first request I received. And the second was on the general plan, across the street here, we have the chiropractor's office, and right behind that, we have it zoned commercial currently. And I think I called and talked to most of you about this a few months back, and there's been interest in rezoning that to residential,
If it
based
can we do-
from the owner.
East?
The owner is requesting
Because
that.
that's just one specific, can't we do that by application and not by reviewing the
Changing
general
the
plan?
general plan.
All he would need to do is come in and apply.
Yeah,
He
and
needs
I'm
to
okay with
apply.
that. I think that's the way we handle it.
Yeah,
You're,
we
you're
can't- we
saying
can't
the
change the
general
whole general
plan
plan for
shows
one
it
guy.
commercial.
The general
Yes.
plan shows it commercial,
So
and I
he just
say,
does an application.
why would we not just change it to residential?
Because he has to apply
He
for a
has to make
change.
an application.
He can't just
And then
whimsically change it just because.
Agree, but it doesn't make sense as a commercial right there. I would,
Maybe.
so why not
So when
change
somebody's
it?
ready to do something,
So
they
you know-
apply.
East of the chiropractor's office?
Wait.
West of the
I don't have any
chiropractor.
clue what you're
Okay.
talking about. You didn't call me.
I called everyone and talked to them at one point on this, but what it is so there's the chiropractor, this was like 6 months ago.
Oh, too much has happened
Yeah.
since then, okay.
So, across the street, there's the chiropractor, and then across the street is Tanner Clinic. You know where Tanner
Oh,
Clinic
you're
is?
talking about, okay, I know you're
Wait,
talking
town
about
planner
that.
across here.
Yes, that way, it's right there.
You're pointing over there.
You're right, I was.
Tyler Elmore's,
We didn't go away.
but he's moved.
It actually is, Gertch.
Okay, I was gonna
Gertch
say, I
owns
think
it.
he sold it then, cause he's moved to,
And so the original plan was there was probably gonna be like a rest home or, expansion there, and Edrich has zero interest in that. There's a resident that wants to build a house there. And he just asked, is there a reason why it's zoned commercial? And I said, well, only because that's what it
Just
is.
make an application.
If it
and
comes to the planning commission, they see reason to it, and then it comes to us, it'll be like easy
Just
peasy.
let 'em
Okay,
tell
but
them
you guys
make an
don't wanna
application.
just change it.
No.
No,
Yeah,
Because
that's
that
not a good
requires
practice,
us-
you wanna have people
Yeah.
apply.
I'm okay with that. That they just
we'll
requested to
have
see
a
if.
lineup for all sorts of requests.
I know. But so they asked if we would be able to do, if we could look at doing that. When I thought I talked to all of you guys, and you guys all said it was fine. But
But if that's the
I-
only
maybe
reason
I
we're
did.
opening the general plan is to make that one
We had the
change,
No.
I say no,
Absolutely
make it for
not.
application.
But I do think that I would request that we do remove the RPC from the low density zone. If you guys are not in favor of the other one,
What are the chances that we're gonna have another RPC?
We said
We
that
haven't
last
had
time.
I know, but what are the other 100-acre lots out there? Just curious.
Cook seven.
Cooks
So-
have one.
Okay, there's one.
Cook seven.
There's one. Okay, then where it's a possibility, then we have to think about it, but at the same time, it's still, I don't know.
I'm bringing it because this was a request. I personally don't think it fits in there. I think there should be a
The
guaranteed.
RPC doesn't fit there.
I think there should be a guaranteed R1, R2, R3 type zone where you can't do townhomes in that zone. Because if you do an RPC, they could put townhomes all over in there.
Sure.
And so I just
Not
said,
all over, there's a limit.
agree.
That's the
But
question.
I do think low density
And
should
it
be a
has to-
protected zone.
But we also have rules according to where they would go and how much they would
Yeah.
go.
Then they should apply for medium density.
I think Noah's looking up the density, but RPC, I think it's 4 units per acre gross, so it's
It's
comparable
still-
to the R2, I think.
It
Right.
could be.
It's
But
because
they do
the
get
amount of
clustered
open
together
space
usually.
that's required with it, that's.
Yeah, that was kind of the general plan, the categories are based on density, obviously, right? So how we define low density, obviously R1, we're saying R2, R3 is roughly, what was the density?
Like 8,000 square foot lot. In most cities, they actually correspond the number of the minimum lot size to the number
On the R,
on the R, not, I mean, it goes in
R
order, R1, 2, 3.
So that's approximately 4 units per acre,
Yeah,
and then
Okay.
RPC is
5.
I'm okay if you guys don't want to do.
So
We just
you
had a
want to
request.
you just want to make sure that we're only dealing with single family homes, is that kind of what?
Yeah,
you think
in
they're
low
trying
density,
to deal with?
the request was that the citizens that live in an R1 zone that has, general planned low density next to them shouldn't have to
worry that.
worry that they could be condos.
The 550
a year
acres
from
they gave
now.
us is.
It just puts
like 4
protections in
something.
existing neighbors.
But the max can't be over,
Well, the whole idea is that they.
max can't be over 5.
They squish them more together, kind of like the
So I don't know what exact
cluster.
number it's at right now.
And then you have more space.
What happened
We
to our
said, no,
cluster
you need
subdivisions?
to-
So
It's still there.
The cluster isn't allowed use in here.
Brody?
So I think what you're getting
Oh,
at
that's right,
is
that's
what
right.
is low density, right? And so, where do you wanna cut it off? What is low density, at what point does it go
A
to
number.
medium?
We
So
need a
he's
number.
saying 4 units per acre, and I'm saying 5 is
5.
still okay, because that's RPC, right?
I'm just saying a zone that allows for townhomes. I no longer think townhomes are considered
Low density.
low density, is my point. And I understand that there's lots and lots of fields around them and all of this,
Yeah.
but the request that I've had is RPC not be in there.
The amendment could say, I mean, if you wanna set the limit of 5, which is the RPC, it sounds like, but you could say in the language, if RPC, if single family.
Density of shoreline.
Mm. So
That's an
that
interesting
would
thought.
keep the townhomes from.
I think that would meet what they were concerned about.
Okay.
You want single
Something like
family, not, yeah, I get it.
If you remember when we were doing the envisioning thing for the
Yeah.
general plan, the pictures that we showed for
Right.
low density were all single family. The
Mhm.
pictures that we showed for medium density is all townhomes, and then high density is all apartments.
Right,
But the RPC
is a mix.
gets a little blurry because you do allow townhomes, but in the overall scale of density in the world of development, 5 units per acre is by no means considered to be medium density or high density. For these people that live on these larger acres, they're like, yeah, RPC is high density, but if we look the big picture, no ways 5 units per acre is high density. or
You
medium
guys can
density.
decide, what's your druthers here?
But it does have townhomes, so that's where
I'd say we hammer that sucker out and leave it alone for a while.
Lisa?
Well, I can understand why you would want to be protective of putting in townhomes next to something, especially when it's considered low density. But I think that we have so many stipulations already in place, and an RPC has to have larger, doesn't it have, what's our acreage on our?
Has to have
on
at
our
least
RPC?
100 acres.
So we have one other thing that we're worried about, one other possibility of that happening, and I don't think that that's worth revisiting it again for that.
David?
Who's not telling.
Well, if we're gonna address the general plan, I want it to be more than just one little issue like that, because that can be handled just because it has to be an application, and we don't have to pass it, and it's, as noted, there's very few possibilities left where it could even be an application. So I don't wanna open the general plan for just 1 or 2 things. It's gotta be that we really think that there's some major overhaul if we're gonna open this again. That's my opinion.
Okay.
I don't
Alright.
want,
You good?
I'm good, thank you.
You good? Okay. All right. Anything else? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So wait, do we have to,
we don't have closed session.
no, I mean for the, yeah, so
Because
moved.
we're still in.
Yes, we're still in general
still-
session, we have to adjourn again.
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
From David, do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Motion to re-adjourn.
Yeah, do we have to motion to
Can I
adjourn?
just
from
say
the-
that after this marathon